Chapter 501. Lindong lay slumped in the depression like a broken puppet, utterly unconscious. Yangba, Changnan, Shendong, and the other senior students stared in horror, their eyes widening as dread coiled in their chests. Even Ling Fengshui's mind went blank. She could do nothing but watch, frozen in disbelief. Then, with a succession of thunderous detonations, the upperclassmen snapped back to their senses. Boom! 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 A chorus of roars ripped through the air as Yangba and his companions launched a ferocious counterattack. Spiritual power erupted from their dantian in a last-ditch gamble, weaving together dozens of deadly spells that surged forward like a tidal wave. Their target was clear, Ye Cheng. As the Academy's top students, their reactions outpaced even Ling Fengshui's. The sight of Lindong's shattered form at their feet shattered any remaining illusions. They had catastrophically underestimated Ye Cheng's strength. Now there was no turning back, no chance for diplomacy. If they didn't take him down here and now, it would be the end of all of them. Determined, they hurled every ounce of their power at him in a single, desperate bid for survival. Boom! The heavens and earth shook, and the ancient forest trembled to its roots. This was the Tianzang Sacred Forest, a legendary forbidden zone in the northern wilderness of Shenzhou, teeming with fearsome beasts and governed by extraordinarily stable spatial laws. Ordinarily, even a duel between emperors would send shockwaves only 100 miles wide. But now, at the very heart of this cataclysmic clash, devastation radiated outward for 1,000 miles. Gigantic primordial trees snapped and splintered like toothpicks. Black vortices gouged the earth, carving deep chasms that yawned like bottomless abysses. The sky darkened as debris rained down, and even the most formidable cultivators could do nothing but brace themselves against the onslaught. Ling Fengshui, his protective aura flaring fiercely, fought to hold his ground. Only when the assault finally ebbed did he allow himself a heavy breath. Eyes wide with shock, he looked up at Yangba and the others, who hovered in the air, faces pale, hearts pounding. Beneath their fear lay another, deeper concern, Xiao Yiren. Earlier, Xiao Yiren had already revealed astonishing power, crushing Lindong with relentless force. If such might lay to waste this sacred forest, what fate now awaited them all? Yangba and the others were no strangers to fierce battle. Unleashing a 1,000-mile cataclysm was a gambit powerful enough to make even mid-stage saints hesitate. True, Ye Cheng could have dispatched Lindong in a one-on-one duel, but could he weather an onslaught of that magnitude? 1 breath, 2, 3. 10 heartbeats passed without a sound from the dense forest where Ye Cheng had vanished. High above, Yangba and his companions, once as tense as drawn bows, felt their anxiety drain away. Their frowns eased, triumphant grins spread across their faces. Relief rippled through them, and they were moments from bursting into victorious laughter. Emperor Flame's third transformation, Burning Heaven formation, descend! The calm, authoritative voice floated down from the clouds. Before Yangba and the others could react, the very sky above them erupted in divine fire. 3 primordial infernos, Xiantian Lihuo, Taiyan Divine Fire, and Juyo Bingyan, raged together, painting the heavens in molten reds, blazing golds, and searing blues. Under that apocalyptic conflagration, the triumphant looks on Yangba's face froze into horrified disbelief. The Burning Heaven formation had arrived. With the Emperor Flamebody's power fueling her, Xiao Yiren wove one intricate talisman after another into the air, each one pulsing with forbidden magic. The moment her whispered incantation fell silent, the deadly killing array snapped into being, its searing light sweeping across Yangba and the others. Xiao Yiren poured her spiritual essence into the formation, and the array roared to life. Before Yang, Ba could even let out a warning cry. Their identity tokens flared, alerted to imminent death, and automatically triggered their emergency teleportation, whisking all 8 of them off the battlefield in a blinding flash. But Xiao Yiren had foreseen this gambit. As the teleportation auras enveloped her foes, she unleashed the Emperor Flame Burning Heaven formation. Torrents of divine fire shattered the dimensional barrier and rained down upon Yangba and his comrades. Though none of them perished outright, the assault left them scorched and reeling, proof that even together they were no match for Xiao Yiren's devastating mastery of flame. Half of the God of War points stored in each loser's identity token, The hard-earned points they'd gathered over days, or even decades, were forcibly siphoned away the moment they fell to Xiao Yuren. Merged with Lin Dong's forfeited share, the amassed aura condensed into a luminous orb that streaked across the arena and fused with Xiao Yuren's own token as a trophy. In an instant, his total soared past 200,000 points. Unbelievable. Ling Fengxie and the professors presiding over the ceremony all swallowed hard at the sight of that staggering figure. Even Qi Wenxuan's face drained of color. What no one else realized was that Yang Ba and his two lieutenants had secretly allied with Shen Dong and Chang Nan to single out Xiao Yuren. Their goal was to shield Tiangong Hall's reputation. If too many of its esteemed alumni fell to Xiao Yuren, the hall itself would be disgraced. Now, however, their scheme seemed poised to backfire spectacularly. Qi Wenxuan's scheme had been simple. He'd planned to wrest the God of War points from Xiao Yuren's grasp. The poorer Xiao Yuren became, the more appealing his offers would seem, and the easier it would be to bend Xiao Yuren to his will in the future. But things had gone disastrously wrong. Not only had his strategy backfired, but the three disciples he'd painstakingly trained were now Xiao Yuren's trophies, and half of Qi Wenxuan's own fortune had been seized by Xiao Yuren as well. Qi Wenxuan, proud and unaccustomed to such humiliation, seethed, yet no amount of anger could rewrite what had transpired. Gritting his teeth, he forced himself to swallow his pride. "Well," he muttered, forcing a smile, "if I accept this girl as my disciple, I can still benefit from the points she earns. A master always gains something from her student, after all." With that half-hearted consolation, Qi Wenxuan turned back to the projection screen. There, Xiao Yuren was deep in training, her every move in the Tianzong Holy Forest displayed in crisp detail. Despite himself, Qi Wenxuan felt a flicker of excitement. He leaned closer, eager to see what this formidable new disciple, who had so thoroughly overturned his plans, would do next. Qi Wenxuan forced a smile. Xiao Yuren, she really outdid herself this time. But his expression betrayed him, however subtly, and Ye Cheng, watching every flicker of his old friend's face, couldn't help but grin. He turned back to the hollow screen, where his daughter's name glowed in brilliant characters. Pride swelled in his chest. He let out a satisfied sigh. Once the freshman tournament wrapped up, he told himself he'd have to make his move, not just to hone his own strength, but to secure some exceptional treasures for Yuren. Perhaps the newly refined Heaven-Earth Divine Fire would be the perfect gift. Meanwhile, deep in the Tianzong Sacred Forest, the freshman contest was reaching its climax. With the shock defeat of Yang Ba and the other upper-class challengers, no veteran remained who could stand against Xiao Yuren. Each time a senior cultivator stepped into the arena, it was over almost as soon as it began, beaten, eliminated, and added to Yuren's tally of victories. Now, as the final bout approached, the outcome was no surprise. The title would belong to Xiao Yuren. Only 6 teams of veteran students reappeared on the competition grounds, and none of them were from Tiangong Hall. Those final 6 squads came exclusively from Hua, Endao Hall, and Shadao Hall. Although Tiangong Hall had sent the most returning seniors into the fight, they suffered the worst fate. Not a single team survived. Every Tiangong veteran fell to Xiao Yuren. Nobody openly accused Xiao Yuren of picking on Tiangong Hall, but everyone assumed he was getting revenge for last year's ambush, when Yang Ba, Shen Dong, Chang Nan, and other Tiangong seniors had been besieged. From the outside, it looked perfectly logical. Xiao Yuren was simply repaying old debts. Still, Tiangong Hall's teachers were stung by humiliation. Their halls had dominated the preliminaries, but now they'd been swept out before the finals even began. The results of the freshman contest were pending, yet already the hall's prestige lay in tatters. Their only hope rested on Qi Wenxuan. If he could recruit Xiao Yuren as a disciple, Tiangong Hall's honor could be fully restored. Until then, the teachers could only bite their lips and wait, praying that Qi Wenxuan's invitation would turn the tide. The freshmen who just finished the competition had no idea what the Tiangong Hall instructors were plotting in the square above. Unlike the senior students, who were sent straight back to the academy, the newcomers found themselves at the edge of the Tianzong Holy Forest the moment the contest ended. There, they handed in their identity tokens at the starting point, received their war god marks, and waited for the final rankings to be announced. Only then would they be allowed to return. Because of this procedure, the freshmen remained completely unaware of the heavy mood weighing down the instructors of Tiangong Hall, or of Xiao Yiren's 5-day duel with the seniors. All they knew now was that they were about to fight again, and they surged back toward the starting line with fresh energy. Among the crowd, a small group stood out, brash, overconfident, barking orders at everyone around them as if they already owned the place. Even amidst tens of thousands of new students, their swagger was impossible to miss. Yet despite their bluster, not one freshman dared to defy them. Ye Cheng's gaze flicked over the assembled freshmen with barely concealed frustration. This clique of competitors was bound to dominate the entire contest. Yuan Dao, Wei Anshi, the Golden Flame Demon Leopard, the Bloodthirsty Sky Python, the Lingfeng Evil Bird. Each of them had been handpicked by Tiangong Hall's instructors and granted total exemption from the trials. Backed by the full resources of Tiangong Hall, they wielded not only extraordinary talent, but also immense wealth, and they'd hauled every treasure they owned into the Tianzang Holy Forest. With that level of support, let alone the other exempted prodigies from the Killing Dao Hall and the 10,000 Dao Hall, no ordinary alliance of freshmen could hope to compete. Even if everyone banded together, they still wouldn't stand a chance. The unfairness of it all made Ye Cheng's blood boil. Chapter 502. Ye Cheng watched the 9 exempted Tianjiao swaggering about, openly bullying the newcomers. Many of the fresh faces bristled with anger, but none dared to speak up. Those with stronger wills simply clenched their fists, swallowed their pride, and kept their distance. The more timid among them became unwilling aides, carrying gear or fetching supplies, obediently carrying out every command without a word of protest. There was little anyone could do. The rules of the freshman trials expressly forbade the use of forbidden weapons or any external aids to boost combat strength, but in practice, loopholes always existed. Before the competition began, each of the 9 exempted Tianjiao had been handed a small treasure by the Tiangong Hall instructors, a forbidden array talisman. They were told to refine it into a compact spiritual weapon and conceal it within their examination gear. That hidden killing array proved devastatingly effective. At the critical moment, when it was activated, a shimmering barrier sprang to life, cutting off any would-be pursuers. Even the most seasoned challengers could not penetrate it. With their path blocked, opponents could only stand by helplessly as the 9 genius fighters made their escape. Whenever they encountered one of the Holy Forest's high-tier monsters, Ye Cheng and his small squad would unleash their forbidden slaughter formation. In moments, the beast lay broken at their feet, and they walked away with a hefty cache of points. United in purpose and honed by countless drills, their teamwork proved terrifyingly effective. Among the new recruits, no one could match their sweep-and-conquer tactics. Over the past 5 days, they'd done more than just protect themselves and hunt monsters. Time and again, Ye Cheng's group had cornered rival freshmen, snatching their identity tokens and forcibly claiming half of their points. By the competition's end, even a conservative estimate put the tallies of figures like Yuan Dao and the legendary Bloodthirsty Sky Python well above 1,000 points each, possibly much more. Backed by powerful mentors and armed with ruthless methods, they were untouchable. Who among the frightened newcomers would dare challenge them? Heh! Ye Cheng leaned back against a mossy stump, a satisfied grin on his face. Our mentors are going to make headlines after this freshman contest. Another member of the group chuckled, waving his own token-laden satchel. And look at our haul, over 1,500 points just from the so-called brothers we cleaned out. Now that's what I call a fortune. Even though my Yuan family is a Saint King lineage that dotes on me as their young master, they still can't compare to the more than 1,500 war god points we just earned, points we can trade at the academy for ever more precious treasures. Absolutely. Our thanks go out to these fellow disciples. Yuan Dao and his companions spoke with unmistakable pride, their chests swelling as they met the wary glances of their peers. Laughter and boasts rang out, arrogant to the core. Yet behind that triumphant facade, the bloodthirsty Sky Python's eyes flickered with something like regret. It really is a pity we never crossed paths with that little girl Gu Yiren before the competition ended, he murmured. At her name, the others nodded, though their expressions turned colder. Each of the 9 held in hand a massive formation array, a trump card personally bestowed by the Tiangong Hall instructor to determine the freshman rankings. Besides the 9 of them, the one exception, the genius known as the Heavenly Blood Golden Centipede, who had been knocked out by Xiao Yiren and then recruited by Qi Wenxuan, also possessed a grand formation of this kind. In total, there were 10 such formations, each powerful on its own, but capable of resonating with and amplifying the others. Their combined strength was extraordinary. Originally, these 10 fresh recruits were meant to join forces under a single, massive formation and use it to take down the senior students from Wandao Hall and Shadou Hall. Their instructor at Tiangong Hall had devised the plan specifically so that the 10 formations would unite to humiliate the rival halls by eliminating their older students. No one expected, however, that the Heavenly Blood Golden Centipede wouldn't even get a chance to unleash his secret technique. He went down to a single strike from Xiao Yiren and was the first to fall. With their trump card gone, the 9 remaining students had no choice but to redirect their assault toward other freshmen. Although they still racked up plenty of points, it paled in comparison to the 7,000 to 8,000 points they could have earned by defeating a team of experienced students. If we knock one of them out, each of us will net almost 1,000 points. After 5 days of competition, if Gu Yiren hadn't stalled us, we would have earned at least 5 times as much, maybe even 10. It's all her fault that we've fallen behind. We've got to make her pay for this humiliation. That's right. The moment we get back to the academy, we'll find a way to deal with that brat. Yuan Dao and his companions nodded fiercely. Their voices dripped with malice, and the nearby contenders, newly arrived prodigies all, turned pale and broke out in cold sweat for Xiao Yiren's sake. Just then, a low hum pulsed through the air. Not far ahead, on the edge of the Tianzang Holy Forest, a massive formation sprang to life in the clearing that marked the starting line of the freshman trials. Within its swirling contours, the black-robed elder known as the Heavenly Taoist materialized. With a single pointed finger aimed at the sky, he prepared to announce the competition's opening rite. A low hum of power shivered through the air as a colossal stone tablet, nearly 100 feet square, rose from the earth at the heart of the formation. Runes along its surface glowed, and an invisible force began to tug at every identity token within its range. One by one, the tokens lifted from the hands of the gathered contenders, Yuan Dao, Ye Cheng, bloodthirsty Tianming, and the other young prodigies, and flew upward, embedding themselves in the tablet's stone face. "Begin tallying the scores," a voice rang out, echoing across the courtyard. A ripple of excitement went through the crowd. "This time, we'll sweep the top 9, one contestant cried. "Exactly. Brother Tianming, you're leading all of us. The championship is yours for the taking," another chimed in, nodding toward bloodthirsty Tianming. At the center of this fervor stood bloodthirsty Tianming himself, the young master of the feared bloodthirsty Sky Python clan. His clan's reputation eclipsed even that of the Blood Centipede tribe, whose famed Golden Centipede had once produced a domain master. Whispers of ancient power and bloodline prestige clung to his name, heightening the anticipation. As the tablet's runes blazed brighter, all eyes fixed on the scores beginning to appear. For Ye Cheng and the others, the next few moments would decide their fate in this fierce competition, and whether they could stand alongside the legendary Tianmong at the summit of talent. The bloodthirsty Python clan had always been notorious for its fierce temperament, but it was also ill-fated. Their first, and so far only, domain master had only just broken through to that rank when he was ambushed by the demonic horde from the outer void. He fell in the battle of the malevolent fiends, and with his death, the clan lost its only bloodline inheritance. Had he lived, the bloodthirsty Python might have leaped beyond the ancient saint tier and claimed a place among the ancient gods. Even without that victory, however, producing a domain master at all set the clan apart from most of its peers. Now, as the young lord of the bloodthirsty Python clan, Sky Python enjoyed a reputation for raw talent that outshone nearly every other candidate in in the free trial selection overseen by Master Yuan Dao and the instructors of the Heavenly Work Hall. Their praises fueled his pride, and Sky Python's gaze grew ever more imperi. Aus. Just then, a second token, wreathed in a gentle spiritual light, drifted through the air and clattered onto the stone tablet before them. Sky Python frowned and leaned forward, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What's this now? Which freshman is that?" the bloodthirsty Python drawled, tilting his head as he scanned the edge of the clearing. His gaze came to rest on the token-bearer, and his cold appraisal made her flinch. Then a predatory smile curled the corners of his mouth. Well, if it isn't Xiaoyuan, I never thought you'd have the nerve to show up here. Either you've lost your wits, or you're courting death." At his words, Yuan Dao and the others whipped around. They recognized the token in Xiaoyuan's hand and exchanged uneasy looks. "This is bad," one whispered. "Talk about rotten luck. Xiaoyuan just ran smack into the bloodthirsty Python's ambush." "Don't count on them letting her walk away," another warned. A ripple of tension swept through the gathering of new prodigies. Though few were friends with Xiaoyuan, everyone had heard how Yuan Dao's clique had terrorized the Tianzang Holy Forest for the past 5 days, injuring countless hopeful geniuses in their wake. Now all eyes were on her, and no one dared to blink. Had Xiaoyuan not struck first, suppressing and destroying the Tianquijin centipede, Yuan Dao and his cronies would have bullied them far more viciously. For that reason, most of the newer disciples, though too timid to speak up, quietly harbored deep gratitude toward Xiaoyuan. And when they saw Yuan Dao and his followers gearing up to attack, they couldn't help but break into a cold sweat on Xiaoyuan's behalf. Chapter 503. "Brother Tianmong, stand down," Yuan Dao called with a sneer. "I'll handle this girl myself." He waved the feral Tianmong back, then rubbed his hands together, eyes glittering with malice as he faced Xiaoyuan. Feeling the sharp, murderous aura emanating from him, Xiaoyuan's brow creased, but then a playful smile curved her lips. "Are you two in cahoots with that giant centipede?" she asked, mocking them. Although the mighty Tianshui golden centipede had already been swallowed by Xiaoyi, the other foreign prodigies in the Tiangong Hall, especially the bloodthirsty Tianmong, grew pale with suppressed fury. "Out of my way, Yuan Dao! I'll deal with her personally!" Tianmong roared, coiling his muscles as he lunged forward. Xiaoyuan bristled, her own fighting spirit flaring as she prepared to meet his charge. Around them, the assembled geniuses held their breath, dread tightening their throats. But just as the bloodthirsty Sky Python was about to strike Xiaoyuan, inside the grand formation, Taoist Gentian had been sitting in quiet meditation, eyes closed as he presided over the contest. At last, he opened them, and the forest itself seemed to shudder with the sound of a distant thunderclap. As Domain Lord, he released only a wisp of his qi, yet it was enough to choke the breath from every creature in the Tianzang Holy Forest. Xuandao and the others under his protection felt as though they were pinned beneath a mountain, utterly unable to move. Even the fierce, bloodthirsty Sky Python froze in mid-coil, unwilling to challenge such overwhelming power. Only Xiaoyuan, protected by her Emperor Flame Body, stood more naturally, though she, too, bowed her head before his might. Taoist Gentian regarded her with new respect, then spoke with calm authority. "The contest is over. No more private duels. All newcomers, enter the formation at once and prepare for the ranking announcement." The order rang through the still air. Though Xuandao, the Sky Python, and the others still nursed their grudges against Xiaoyuan, none dared disobey. They bowed and swiftly took their places within the formation. Xiaoyuan alone remained composed, unhurried, yet ready. Xiaoyuan had just swept aside 30 veteran teams without so much as breaking a sweat. She hadn't bothered with Yuan Dao and his companions, didn't even expend any energy, so why would she care what they thought? Even if their hard-earned rewards were handed over to her, she wouldn't bat an eye. Yuan Dao and the others, of course, had no idea what was really on her mind. As they regrouped inside the formation, they slowly composed themselves, casting Xiaoyuan nothing but contemptuous looks. Sneers curled their lips. Yuan Dao let out a mocking chuckle. "Don't think you've gotten off scot-free, little girl. Wait until we get back to the academy. You'll see how much trouble we can cause you." Beside him, the warrior known as Bloodthirsty Python made a low, venomous hiss. Why wait that long? The moment you see our scores compared to yours, you'll realize the gulf between us. I can't wait to watch you beg for mercy, maybe even crawl back home to your parents." A ripple of cruel laughter followed. At that moment, the great stone tablet in the center of the courtyard flared to life, displaying the scores of the new prodigies. Most hovered somewhere between 200 and 300 points. It wasn't until the 10,000th rank that anyone finally cracked 400. Below the 3,000th spot, even the so-called geniuses barely broke 500 points. By the time the standings reached the top 100, scores only crept up into the 700s or 800s. Watching the rising ranks, yet still modest totals of 700, 800, or 900, Yuan Dao, Tianmong, and the rest of the Tiangong Hall prodigies exchanged ever more smug grins. They were certain the 9 of them would claim the competition's top 9 slots without fail. Then the announcer's voice echoed across the hall. 10th place in the freshman competition, Yuan Dao of Tiangong Hall, total score 1,470 points. A burst of laughter rippled from Yuan Dao. But his triumphant grin faltered the moment reality hit. He, Tianmong, and the other 8 hall geniuses had expected to fill out places 1 through 9. How could he possibly be in 10th? Who had edged into the top 10 ahead of them? Yuan Dao and Tianmong raced to the central display slate and scanned the list. Their eyes widened in shock as they read the name in the vacant 9th slot, Ye Cheng. Yuan Dao and his companions stared at Ye Cheng in disbelief. "It's you?" Yuan Dao blurted. "Hey kid, what makes you think you can compete with us for a top 10 spot?" snarled the bloodthirsty sky python, stepping forward. For a heartbeat, their surprise hung in the air. Then they smoothed their expressions into smug condescension. "I never expected someone so inexperienced to show up here," another sneered. "But don't get ahead of yourself. You're nowhere near our level." They'd assumed Ye Cheng would play by the usual freshman rules: band together, prey on new recruits, snatch their identity tokens, and split the spoils. Yet here was one student, single-handedly racking up points faster than all 9 of them combined. The realization fanned their irritation into outright anger. "He's just lucky," one scoffed. "At best, he'll finish 8th or 9th, another added. "Top 5? Top 3? In your dreams." Just then, a pale glow rippled across the massive stone tablet hovering above the arena. With a low hum, it began to inscribe the latest rankings. Golden Flame Demon Leopard, 9th place, 1,496 points. Lingfeng Evil Bird, 8th place, 1,523 points. Wei Anshi, 7th place, 1,540 points. Mo Hang, 6th place, 563 points. Dragonbone Demon Lion, 5th place, 582 points. One name after another appeared in luminous characters, each briefly shining before giving way to the next, as the tablet relentlessly updated the freshman standings. In the blink of an eye, the 3rd place name appeared, but Ye Cheng's name still hadn't materialized on the stone tablet. A sudden hush fell over the tens of thousands of freshmen arrayed below. Every heart pounded as all eyes fixed on the sky monument, waiting first for the runner-up, and then for the champion of the freshman competition to be revealed. Even the normally overconfident, bloodthirsty sky python was breaking out in a cold sweat. His gray-brown vertical pupils gleamed with tension, his knuckles whitened around clenched fists as he silently prayed. But no amount of pleading could alter what happened next. Under the stunned gazes of bloodthirsty sky python himself, Tiangong Hall disciples like Yuan Dao and Wei Anshi, and the countless freshman prodigies crowding the arena, letters began to etch themselves across the monument's glowing surface. Bloodthirsty sky python runner-up, freshman competition total points, 2,123. Runner-up, who then had claimed the top spot? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Student Ye Cheng? Did he take first place? Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. He actually outscored all 9 Tiangong Hall prodigies combined. Freshman champion, couldn't be more deserved. A wave of excitement rippled through the gathered freshmen as they stared at Ye Cheng with wide-eyed admiration. But over by the bloodthirsty sky python sect's camp, spirits plummeted. Tianmong, their pride and top disciple, stood rigid, teeth clenched, eyes locked on the glowing Fangtian monument. Silently, he raged. "Impossible! I've already scored over 2,100 points. How could he have beaten me?" A fellow disciple leaned closer. "How many points did he get exactly?" Yuan Dao slapped Tianmong on the shoulder, offering a wry grin. Relax. He's just lucky, maybe only a couple of points ahead of us. Another voice piped up, and even if he did snag the freshman champion title, the bonus is only an extra 100 points. That won't shift the overall standings. Exactly, agreed a third. We still have plenty of time. There'll be chances to put him in his place. They plastered on reassuring smiles, but Tianmong's glare never wavered. He wouldn't rest until Ye Cheng was knocked off his pedestal. Tianmong, the bloodthirsty sky python, had just taken a steadying breath and bobbed his head in agreement with Yuan Dao's counsel when a ripple of astonished shouts swept through the ranks. In an instant, he and his followers froze, eyes darting to the towering monument of rankings at the far end of the arena. Yuan Dao's reassuring words caught in his throat. With a heavy thud, Tianmong's enormous body collapsed to his knees, his serpentine frame trembling uncontrollably. All at once, a shaft of golden light arced across the monument, pausing above what had been Tianmong's name. The inscription shifted in a flash of brilliance, revealing a single line, Ye Cheng, first place in the freshman tournament. Total points, 272,123. Silence reigned as the full impact of the announcement sank in. Chapter 504, 272,123 points? That can't be right. Yuan Dao's face drained of color as he stared at the glowing jade tablet. Wei Anshi leaned in beside him, brow furrowed. There must be a malfunction. No freshman, no one, could possibly amass that many points. Bloodthirsty Sky Python slammed his fist against the railing. Even if someone fought nonstop for 5 days straight, the ceiling is 200,000. This is absurd. All around the hall, the other 7 members of Tiangong Hall's famed 9 Tianjiao exchanged panicked glances. Their eyes flicked to Taoist Gentian, the official scorer, desperate for any sign that the reading was flawed. Taoist Gentian's face remained composed. He lifted a slender hand, adjusted his ancient robes, and spoke in a calm, measured tone. As clearly displayed, there is no error. Student Ye Cheng legitimately earned 272,123 points over the past 5 days by every rule of the contest. A stunned silence fell before ripples of disbelief washed through the assembly of tens of thousands of freshmen. How could he have reached that total? Someone whispered. Did he unlock a hidden mastery we don't know about? Or did he break the system? All eyes swung toward Ye Cheng, who stood slightly apart, expression inscrutable. In that charged moment, every newcomer in Tiangong Hall knew one thing for certain. Everything they thought they understood about strength, talent, and the path to glory was about to be rewritten. As Yuan Dao had already pointed out, even if Xiaoyiren had spent the last 5 days slaughtering fellow disciples non-stop, she could only earn 200 or 300 points per freshman at most. And even then, anyone who managed 500 or 600 in a single day was an extreme rarity. No matter how fierce she was, 200 or 300 kills in one day was her upper limit. There was simply no way she could have amassed so many points in just 5 days, unless... The enormous sky python trembled violently, as a horrifying possibility flashed through its reptilian mind. Its voice shook as it hissed to the others. Unless she hasn't been hunting us freshmen at all. But the senior students, those whose duty it is to prey on new arrivals. At the python's words, Yuan Dao, Wei Anshi, and the others snapped awake from their stunned silence. They turned to look at Guyirin in dawning terror. Eliminating senior students? The notion was unthinkable, yet it was the only explanation for her staggering point total, nearly 300,000. What kind of power does she wield? Wei Anshi whispered, voice trembling. Is she on the level of a quasi-saint? In that instant, every one of them understood they were facing a force unlike anything they had ever imagined. Or could he be a saint? Nobody had expected Ye Cheng to skyrocket to nearly 300,000 points, especially not in just 5 days. In that short span, he dismantled multiple senior prodigy teams, leaving even the fiercest competitors trembling. Bloodthirsty Sky Python and his cohorts had once boasted they'd humiliate this newcomer, but now their bravado evaporated in the chill of genuine fear. If Ye Cheng took their boasting seriously, life at the God of War Academy would become an endless ordeal. What should we do? Whispered one of them. Big Brother Tianmang? Yuan Dao and Wei Anxi exchanged uneasy glances as they turned to Bloodthirsty Sky Python, their self-styled leader. His nickname was no empty boast. He possessed a towering frame and eyes that bored into your soul. But even he was taken aback. He squared his broad shoulders and barked, "Why are you all so jittery? No matter how powerful Ye Cheng is, he's still only one man. We've got instructor Qi Wenxuan and the other masters backing us. From now on, we'll train exclusively in the Tiangong Hall sectors. Those areas are ours. Do you really think he'd dare barge in there?" A few of the men dared a nod. "Right," Wei Anxi forced. "Big brother Tianmang's right. We're not, afraid of him." As they rallied around him, the cold grip of panic loosened, just enough to let the warmth of false confidence creep back in. The God of War Academy was vast, more like a fortified city than a school. Its courtyards sprawled for miles, dotted with grand training arenas, secluded cultivation groves, and labyrinthine corridors of lecture halls. Around every corner, prodigies and masters alike honed their martial talents, engaged in fierce friendly duels or whispered rumors of legendary cultivators. Yet in all that expanse, Ye Cheng's name had already become a thunderclap. Bloodthirsty Sky Python and his allies believed their alliances, with Qi Wenxuan and the Tiangong Hall, would shield them. But as Ye Cheng's reputation continued to rise, they would soon learn that legends do not always heed the boundaries of halls or the backing of powerful patrons. Inside the academy, there were numerous communal training grounds open to students of all three halls, Tiangong, Yuan Dao, and Wei Anxi. But each hall also maintained its own private practice zones. Only those bearing an instructor's explicit permission could cross into another hall's territory. Of course, the 9 of them knew they wouldn't be confined to Tiangong Hall's grounds forever. Thinking otherwise was sheer fantasy. Still, they repeated that notion to bolster their courage. They spoke in gruff tones, trying to sound unfazed, but their voices carried just a bit too loudly. Xiao Yiren, patrolling nearby, caught the tail end of their bravado and turned in their direction. Even Sky Python, the fiercest among Tiangong's disciples, forced a warped, obsequious grin, so painful-looking it rivaled a child's tears. Just to curry favor, everyone could see through it. Meanwhile, in the competition square, the Tiangong Hall instructors frowned darkly. Their faces, already flushed with embarrassment over their disciples' performance, sank even lower as they watched this shameless display. Even Qi Wenxuan's brow furrowed, and the fierce, ebony sky crocodile divine horn quivered as if stirred by its original master's wrath, sending subtle ripples through the surrounding void. "Brother Qi, what do we do now?" one of the Tiangong Hall instructors whispered, voice tight with tension. Qi Wenxuan blinked, his attention snapping back. His gaze settled on Ye Cheng's image flickering in the projection, and a bright light sparked in his eyes. "Relax," he said. "I have a plan." He turned to the assembly. "If you're willing to accept this young prodigy Ye Cheng as your disciple, every obstacle in our way will vanish." Far below, in the heart of the Tianzang Holy Forest, Taoist Gentian raised a hand. Instantly, the tens of thousands of identity tokens stored on the Great Stone Stele, and all the rewards earmarked for the top-ranking competitors, were released back to their rightful owners. And because Ye Cheng had claimed first place, he received the grandest reward of all, a full 1,000 War God points. Though the extra 1,000 points he'd just earned seemed modest compared to Xiao Yiren's earlier triumphs, Ye Cheng accepted his token with calm resolve. Flanked by fellow newcomers, he followed Taoist Gentian into the teleportation array, his heart quickening with anticipation. In the next instant, the world rippled, and they were back on the competition grounds. From the raised viewing terraces, the masters of the three halls watched tens of thousands of fresh geniuses step out of the array. Over the past 5 days, aside from Xiao Yiren's dazzling display, each contestant had proven their worth in distinct and remarkable ways. Many had already drawn the keen interest of one or even several mentors, and now the hall leaders prepared to vie for the students they most wished to guide. All around them, assembled monks and spirit creatures held their breath, excitement gleaming in their eyes. The next phase of the ceremony would reveal more than just the mentors' resumes at the God of War Academy. After witnessing Xiao Yiren's astonishing performance, Every spectator was burning with curiosity to see which master this unparalleled genius would choose. Yet, as one saintly elder stroked his beard, he dismissed the idea of true suspense. It can only be one of three, he declared. Saint Qi Wenxuan, Master Sun Shaoshang of the Wandao Hall, or the prosperous Master Chanling from the Shadao Hall. He may not be as ostentatious as Saint Qi, but his background is every bit as formidable. A ripple of agreement ran through the gathered crowd. None believed for a moment that Xiao Yiren would return to Ye Cheng's sect. Just then, the clear voice of Gentian Taoist rang out across the assembly. All students, please step forward and choose your mentors. At that signal, the new prodigies, having long since made up their minds, lifted their heads, eyes shining with expectation, and advanced toward their chosen masters. Xiao Yiren, standing among the spectators, was just about to take a step toward Ye Cheng when Qi Wenxuan's voice rang out again from the viewing platform. Hold on, Elder Gentian. I have conditions you haven't heard yet. Elder Gentian Taoist raised an eyebrow, but since Qi Wenxuan's request broke no rules, he inclined his head. Very well. Speak your terms. Qi Wenxuan allowed a faint smile to play across his lips. He stepped forward, lifted his hand, and snapped his fingers. In an instant, a pale golden flame, soothing and otherworldly, flickered into being at his fingertip. Every eye in the arena snapped to attention. Is that innate divine fire? Someone whispered. Cultivators and mystical beasts alike stared, astonished. Those who practiced the great Tao of fire felt their hearts surge, for they knew there were two kinds of heavenly flames: the acquired Tao fire, painstakingly refined from rare treasures and elemental spirits, and the far rarer innate fire, a blazing gift one is born with. And here before them was undeniable proof of the latter. There are two kinds of Tao fire. One is the acquired Tao fire, countless in number, cultivated and refined anew each year. The other is the innate divine fire, a spark born with the great Tao of heaven and earth, capable of resonating with the great Tao of fire itself. Since the founding of the 4 continents of Tianshuan, from the dawn of time until now, only 36 innate divine fires have ever appeared, each one rarer than the last. For any cultivator or creature who follows the way of fire, obtaining an innate divine fire is like suddenly elevating one's potential to an entirely new plane. Those who might never hope to achieve sainthood can, by its power, ascend to quasi-saint or even full saint. Those barred from the Tao's higher realms can leapfrog to domain master, or further still, to realm master, and go on to found eternal divine clans or sects. And now Qi Wenxuan actually wields such an innate divine fire? A stunned silence fell over the audience. Eyes went wide, mouths hung open. Few could believe their ears, fewer still their eyes. At that moment, Qi Wenxuan turned and spoke, his voice calm yet carrying across the hall. Student Ye Cheng, I see you too. Practice the way of fire. Could you please provide the full text of the chapter you'd like revised? Once I have the complete machine-translated passage, I'll rename Gu Changqing to Ye Cheng, confirm his gender as male, and deliver a polished, coherent English version. Chapter 505. Qi Wenxuan's calm declaration struck like thunder in the ears of everyone present. Innate divine fire. Even for someone like him, who did not follow the grand path of fire, owning an innate divine fire was an inconceivable treasure. And yet he was offering it away as if it were nothing more than a casual gift? Taoist Gentian's eyes widened in astonishment. He leaned forward, scrutinizing the flickering flame, its pale gold glow shimmering in Qi Wenxuan's outstretched palm. Then his expression shifted from shock to understanding. So that's what's happening, he murmured. This isn't a true innate divine fire at all, but an acquired divine fire. Despite that, its quality so far surpasses ordinary Tao fire that it truly deserves the title Acquired Divine Fire. A murmur of admiration rippled through the gathering. The Sky Crocodile clan really does possess unparalleled resources. An acquired divine fire of this caliber, unheard of. Taoist Gentian's revelation brought everyone back to their senses. Eyes fixed on the pale gold flame, the assembly's firepath holy lords studied it with renewed intensity. As they calmed their minds and examined the fire's subtle fluctuations, they all recognized the same truth. This was no ordinary flame, but a masterpiece of divine combustion, worthy of its exalted name. Compared to a truly innate divine fire, Gu Yecheng's flame lacked that seamless harmony with heaven and earth. He frowned, clearly displeased that Elder Gentian had exposed his secret. Recovering his composure almost immediately, he chuckled and said with calm confidence, "Elder Gentian's insight is admirable. You're right. My golden divine fire didn't spring from birth. It's the product of grinding together 99 different acquired Tao fires and refining them over 1,000 years. As you observed, this so-called acquired Tao fire now rivals the innate varieties. If it were entered on the Heaven and Earth Divine Fire Registry, it would easily rank among the top 50, only a hair's breadth below the 36 great innate divine fires." He paused, lower lip pressed between his teeth. Worry flickered in his eyes. Was his boasting enough to impress the assembly? To be safe, he leaned forward and added, "Furthermore." Qi Wenchuan's eyes locked onto Gu Yecheng. "If you truly are Gu Yecheng, and you agree to become my disciple, then before everyone here, I swear, within the next 10 years, I will personally take you to the Cemetery of All Saints and secure an innate divine flame to aid your cultivation." A stunned hush fell over the crowd. Only moments ago, they dismissed Qi Wenchuan's offer. After all, the golden divine flame he promised wasn't an innate one. But now he was pledging to breach the Cemetery of All Saints itself, the most infamous forbidden zone on the northern wilderness divine continent. Even saint kings who dared venture in risked never returning. Yet the danger was matched by its lure. Legend spoke of 3 innate divine flames hidden deep within the cemetery, each more powerful than any mere artifact. More astonishingly, every clue suggested those flames remained unclaimed, waiting for someone bold enough to find them. As the realization sank in, the spectators exchanged wide-eyed glances. Qi Wenchuan's promise was no idle boast. He wasn't just offering another ordinary treasure. He was dangling the most coveted prize in all the realms, an innate divine flame, the key to transcendent power, and he was willing to lead the way. Qi Wenchuan's offer was staggering. If he truly meant to seek out the dragon-winged divine flame and secure its innate fire for Gu Yecheng, he would have to marshal vast resources, risk his life, and prepare for every contingency. And yet, he wasn't asking for an immediate venture. He'd granted a full 10 years. To a cultivator of his stature, a decade was scarcely a burden. "Truly, these terms are more than generous," someone murmured in admiration. Even the Gentian Taoist, who had been the most vocal skeptic, fell silent, visibly moved. He had called Qi Wenchuan's bluff only moments before, aware that Qi had secretly messaged Yang Ba during the tournament and engineered the attack on Gu Yecheng. His warning had served 2 purposes, safeguarding Gu Yecheng and forcing Qi Wenchuan onto the defensive. In his view, both aims had been accomplished. Qi Wenchuan had laid all his cards on the table, and there seemed no reason for Gu Yecheng to refuse. A hush settled over the hall as everyone turned to Gu Yecheng, waiting for his nod. But Gu Yecheng met their gazes with calm indifference and said nothing in reply to Qi Wenchuan's extravagant proposal. After Qi Wenchuan finished speaking, the little girl, who'd been politely holding back her excitement, could no longer contain herself. She darted through the circle of stunned, curious faces and in a few swift steps reached Gu Yecheng. For a moment, her joy shone brightly in her wide eyes, but then she remembered the solemnity of the occasion. Her expression grew serious as she bowed deeply. "Master Ye Cheng," she said, voice steady, "will you accept me as your disciple?" Gu Yecheng couldn't suppress a smile at her earnestness. He nodded, returning her bow with a gentle inclination of his head. "I would be honored." A triumphant cry escaped the girl's lips. "Yes!" she exclaimed, then sprang up beside him and wrapped her arms around his outstretched arm as though it were the greatest treasure she'd ever known, refusing to let go. Countless cultivators and beasts, including the famed Gentian Taoist, stood gaping in disbelief. Qi Wenchuan's face drained of color as he glared at the small figure before him. His voice trembled with fury. "What? Am I not as qualified as Gu Yecheng?" Xiao Yiren blinked at him with wide, innocent eyes, though her tone was unmistakably smug. "Not even close. First off, you look so terrifying, no one in their right mind would sign up as your disciple." One after another, they ran off to pick a fight with Daddy, and Daddy taught them a lesson they won't soon forget. Yet here you are, still miffed and plotting revenge. How could anyone ever respect you as a master? Terrifying. Can't recruit disciples? Qi Wenchuan pressed a hand to the black horn on his forehead, recalling how 2 of his pupils had already ended up under Ye Cheng's sway. His anger flared anew until a single word stopped him cold. Daddy? You call him Daddy? Xiao Yiren tilted her head, mischief dancing in her eyes. Of course, he's my father. Qi Wenchuan staggered back, shock and indignation warring on his face. You're Ye Cheng's daughter. Xiao Yiren threw back her head and laughed, every bit the spoiled child in that moment. Surprised? Gu Yiren is actually instructor Ye Cheng's daughter? Is this for real? A ripple of shock swept through the arena. Qi Wenchuan's eyes went wide, his jaw dropping in utter disbelief. Everyone had long suspected a connection between Ye Cheng and Yiren. After all, they'd clearly known one another before entering the War God Academy. Ye Cheng had even been seen personally guiding her training, sharing his cultivation techniques, and extending her special favors. Yet no one ever imagined their bond was familial. They had assumed it was nothing more than a master-apprentice relationship. No one thought that sharing the surname Gu meant they were father and daughter. The pair's talents were simply too dazzling, far beyond what mere heredity could explain. In the eyes of the world, and among the monks and spirit beasts of the War God Academy, a genius like Ye Cheng was already an anomaly. 2 such prodigies born to the same family? It seemed inconceivable, but as the realization spread, whispers turned into murmurs of stunned acceptance. Could it really be that this remarkable instructor and his astounding student shared not just skills and secrets, but blood? It truly takes extraordinary fortune to produce a peerless talent like this. And now, the Gu clan has not just 1 but 2 prodigies, father and daughter, spanning 2 generations. It's nothing short of astonishing. Qi Wenx, Yuan, and Tiangong Hall are in real trouble this time. From the tiered stands, monks and beast folk alike exchanged awed whispers as they stared at Ye Cheng and his young daughter perched on the viewing platform. Just when everyone thought the competition had reached its climax, a light, mocking voice rang out from beyond the arena gates, and silence fell. How interesting. Absolutely fascinating. The newcomer's tone was playful, almost indulgent. I never expected that, after only 6 months away from the academy, I'd return to such a spectacle. I was certain Tiangong Hall would sweep this recruitment. It appears I've underestimated the true heroes of the world. I'd be happy to polish this for you. Could you please provide the full chapter text? Right now I only have the brief excerpt. But as this voice sounded, Qi Wenchuan and the other Tiangong Hall instructors, who were originally in a state of dismay, were all startled, and then they looked up in surprise and looked towards the source of the voice, with supreme surprise in their eyes. Second brother, you are back. Once I have the entire chapter, I can rename Gu Changqing to Ye Cheng, ensure he's consistently presented as male, and deliver a smooth, idiomatic English version. Chapter 506, Second Senior Brother? Ye Cheng tilted his head, lifting an eyebrow as he regarded the newcomer. The man advancing toward them was a broad-shouldered alien warrior, scarcely 30 years old. From his back spread a pair of jet-black wings, each feather glinting like carved diamond in the sunlight, and from his forehead curved 2 ox-like horns. His fierce countenance, set off by those inky wings, gave him the air of a demon risen from the abyss. Although his formidable aura was tightly reined in, Ye Cheng could still sense a tremendous well of divine power coiled just beneath the surface. Compared to him, even Qi Wenchuan, the other Tiangong Hall mentors, and Hong Yu, famed for her strength in Shadow Hall, all seemed to pale. This man was without question the most powerful instructor at Tiangong Hall. Despite that, Ye Cheng merely offered a faint, confident smile. There was not a trace of fear in his steady gaze. Hong Yu, by contrast, visibly trembled. Fearing he might underestimate their guest, she hurried to his side and whispered, "Brother Dao, stay on your guard. He really is the top instructor of Tiangong Hall." Ye Cheng listened attentively as Hong Yu filled him in on the newcomer's pedigree and power. He's a Tianyu Queen Yu, one of the ancient, divine Queen Yu clan. His cultivation has already perfected the Saint Lord stage, and his combat prowess rivals that of many early domain masters. In fact, in our entire War God Academy, he ranks among the top 5 strongest practitioners. Hong Yu paused, letting the weight of that statement sink in before continuing. What's more, the ancestral domain masters of the Quinyu clan themselves have taken a special interest in him. As their official representative here at the Academy, he was personally accepted as a disciple by the venerable Sky Crocodile clan ancestor, and he's now under the tutelage of 2 alien domain masters. That's why Qi Wenchuan always calls him senior brother. You really can't afford to underestimate him. Ye Cheng inclined his head. He'd already sensed the newcomer's formidable aura, but hearing these details confirmed just how exceptional the youth truly was. On the other side of the courtyard, Qi Wenchuan's excitement was impossible to miss as he watched his senior brother return. His eyes shone with pride and perhaps a hint of relief. Ye Cheng, however, remained composed. If this Tianyu Quinyu truly wielded power on par with early domain masters, every interaction with him would demand Ye Cheng's fullest attention and respect. With a final nod to Hongyu, Ye Cheng made a mental note. Stay alert, stay respectful, and above all, watch the Tianyu Quinyu closely. His next move could decide more than just a friendly sparring match. It might reshape alliances within the War God Academy itself. After stepping forward to greet him, one of the mentors couldn't hide his curiosity. Second senior brother, has our eldest senior brother returned yet? Tianyu Quinyu shook his head with a knowing smile. Not just yet, he's still out selecting the perfect site. Once he does, he'll retreat and break through into the Domain Lord realm. The moment he comes back, he won't just be our mentor anymore, he'll be promoted to First Elder. In fact, he'll be the very first mentor in the history of the God of War Academy to ascend to Elder. At his words, every instructor in Tiangong Hall burst into excited chatter, eyes bright with surprise. Really, that's incredible. What fantastic news. Our big brother is becoming a Domain Lord and an Elder. Tiangong Hall will gain even more clout. They laughed and exchanged congratulatory looks. See, Tiangong Hall truly is the strongest in the academy. A mere freshman tournament can't touch our reputation. Their earlier disappointment over the competition vanished in an instant, replaced by pride and anticipation for their eldest senior brother's triumphant return. On the viewing platform, the instructors of Wandao Hall and Shadao Hall, along with countless cultivators and mystical beasts drawn to the ceremony, stood in stunned silence. The big brother Qi Wenchuan had mentioned was none other than Ye Cheng, chief instructor of Tiangong Hall and the Academy's most formidable tutor. Ye Cheng's reputation rested on both raw talent and relentless cultivation. He was among the very first students to earn the coveted Special Gold Order when the God of War Academy opened its doors a century ago. In the 100 years since, under the Academy's tutelage, his power has soared to unprecedented heights. For comparison, Tianyu Quinyu holds a place among the Academy's top 5 instructors. Yet Ye Cheng vies for a rank even higher. He is spoken of in the same breath as the heads of the other 2 elite Special Gold Order halls, Killing Dao and 10,000 Dao, and is a leading contender for the title of the Academy's single strongest tutor. Unbeknownst to the onlookers in the viewing gallery, the usually reserved chief of Tiangong Hall, fresh from his travels, had quietly taken advantage of the moment to break through into the Domain Master realm and soar into the sky. After all, tutors of his stature, especially those bearing the prestigious Gold Order, are in a class far above the current worshippers and guest elders of the God of War Academy. While those guests are undeniably powerful, their cultivation typically peaks at Domain Master perfection, placing a firm cap on their potential. But for someone like Tiangong Hall's chief mentor, once that boundary is crossed, an entirely new era of rapid growth begins. Given another century of practice, it would not be surprising if he were to advance directly to Domain Master perfection, or even scale the heights of the Realm Master realm. With such prospects, his voice, his influence, and the resources at his command within the Academy are sure to eclipse those of any ordinary tutor. Tianyu Quinyu stood atop the dais, his gaze sweeping over the assembled masters of Shadao Hall and Wandao Hall. With a cool smile, he intoned the proverb on everyone's lips. One misstep, and both halls will find themselves trampled beneath Tiangong Hall's heel. At his words, the instructors of Shadao and Wandao stiffened, nervously exchanging glances. Even the gathered monks and mystical creatures stifled gasps of shock. Exactly the reaction Tianyu Quinyu had been aiming for. His pride swelled. Though he had only recently returned to the academy, Tianyu Qinyu was well aware of how Tiangong Hall's reputation had suffered during the freshman tournament. As its foremost disciple, the restoration of its prestige rested squarely on his shoulders, and he intended to succeed. Having delivered his calculated dig at the Grandmaster of Tiangong Hall, Tianyu Qinyu shifted his attention to Xiao Yiren. He raised an eyebrow. "Your talent is impressive," he acknowledged. "Judging by your current strength, you already rival the late saints themselves." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, still reeling from his earlier boast. "But," he added, a faint curl of satisfaction on his lips, "you remain just a bit below the disciple chosen by my senior brother." His words landed like a thunderclap, leaving everyone around him momentarily stunned. They had all witnessed Xiao Yiren's power. Tianyu Qinyu had even gone so far as to compare her to the late saint, and nobody questioned it. So when he announced that the chief instructor of Tiangong Hall had taken a disciple even stronger than Xiao Yiren, murmurs spread through the crowd. If that were true, this mysterious student would be approaching saintly perfection. How could such a thing be possible? Yet, when you considered Tianyu Qinyu's stature and the immense talent and good fortune of Tiangong Hall's chief instructor, any lingering doubts evaporated. Xiao Yiren clenched her fists, fury flaring in her eyes. "Elder Tianyu," she spat, "you're all talk. If your prodigy is so great, have them face me now." Tianyu Qinyu chuckled, amusement dancing in his eyes. He didn't even bother looking at Xiao Yiren. Instead, his gaze fell on Ye Cheng. Behind Ye Cheng, Ji stood Qi Wenxuan, who had quietly relayed to him the long-standing grievances between their sect and Tiangong Hall, especially those against Qi Wenxuan himself. Now, the stage was set. Tianyu Qinyu, who already grasped the situation, leveled a cold, unfriendly stare at Ye Cheng. Given his rank, he wouldn't dare lay a hand on Xiao Yiren. Gu was another matter entirely. "So you're the Academy's hot new tutor, Ye Cheng," Tianyu began, his tone dripping with condescension. "I hear you've reached gold order status, much like my senior brother. But unlike him, he's humble, always showing proper respect. You're a different story." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Honestly, compared to my brother, you fall embarrassingly short." A slow, mocking smile curved Ye Cheng's lips. He raised an eyebrow and met Tianyu's glare without a flinch. "If you want to fight, just say it. Spare me the polite chatter about respecting one's elders." With a casual flick of his wrist, Ye Cheng beckoned. "Go on, show me if you even deserve the title of senior." Tianyu Qinyu's lips twitched in surprise and amusement. He hadn't expected Ye Cheng to call his bluff so directly. "Very well," he said with a sharp laugh. "This should be entertaining." Ye Cheng's face drained of all color. He let out a low shout and took a single, resolute step forward. Boom! The breath he'd long kept hidden burst forth in a dazzling flash, revealing the full might of the Saint King's perfection realm. At the same instant, ripples of divine power, thick with raw, destructive energy, radiated outward from Lord Tianyu Qinyu's body, enveloping them both in a roaring tide of force. "This is the realm of Tao," someone whispered in awe. "All hail Lord Tianyu Qinyu. He's mastered realm power before even attaining the realm master stage," cried the instructors of Tiangong Hall. Around them, every cultivator and beast paused in astonishment, eyes fixed on the towering display of strength. Buoyed by their admiration, Tianyu Qinyu's lips curled into a contemptuous sneer. He looked down at Ye Cheng and spoke with icy deliberation. "I'll indulge you this once, since you've struggled so hard to cultivate. I won't overwhelm you outright. I'll fight you with my incarnation body." As he spoke, Tianyu Qinyu began gathering spiritual energy, the air crackling around him with anticipation. But instead of answering with fear or fury, Ye Cheng simply laughed, calm, confident, and unshaken. "Don't hold back. Give it everything you've got. If you don't, I'll have to use my second move, and then you won't stand a chance." Chapter 507. No chance for a counterattack? Ye Cheng's indifferent gaze ignited a murderous fury in Tianyu Qinyu's eyes. He snarled, "Very well. I'll give you exactly what you want." With that, he bellowed and unleashed a surge of spiritual power. At the same moment, his domain flared to life around them. The vast observation platform, thousands of feet across, was suddenly wreathed in crackling strands of purple-gold lightning. The bolts coiled and writhed like celestial dragons, their brilliance both terrifying and ethereal. To any ordinary onlooker, the storm would have passed through the domain's barrier without effect, but when those thunderous arcs slammed into Ye Cheng, they collided with his defenses, sending shockwaves that shattered his divine light and rent the surrounding void. This was the very essence of a true domain, a personal pocket space shaped by the cultivator's mastery of the Tao of space. Inside it, the domain's owner is all but invincible, and only those he permits may enter unharmed. Bolstered by this absolute supremacy, Tianyu Qinyu's confidence surged. He believed no one could stand against him now. Only a domain can counter another domain, Tianyu Qinyu declared, his voice cold and commanding. You, who haven't even grasped the domain of the Tao, are nothing but ants before me, laughably ignorant. He paused, a cruel smile twisting his lips. But don't worry, the Academy has rules. I won't kill you. I'll simply teach you a lesson, let you feel the pain, taste the regret, and ensure you never rise up in arrogance again, never dare oppose Tiangong Palace. With that, Tianyu Qinyu's eyes glowed. He poured his spiritual power into the Thunder Domain, weaving it into a living tapestry of divine might. Within that swirling storm stood an ancient one-footed Qinyu, towering between heaven and earth like a jagged peak. Its roar shook the skies as it summoned endless thunder, raging, cataclysmic, a world-destroying god made manifest. Tianquan, thunder destroys gods and demons. At his roar, the purple gold lightning within the domain blazed even brighter. Bolts of crackling energy writhed like celestial dragons, coiling through the air. Wherever they struck, the void itself threatened to collapse, and the very foundations of heaven and earth trembled in their wake. The thunderbolts crackled with earth-shaking force, each bolt striking with the power of a Saint Lord Perfection Realm cultivator's all-out attack. At that moment, Tianyu Qinyu unleashed his Heavenly Ox treasure technique, its potency further magnified by the blessing of his mastered thunder domain. Hundreds of purple-gold lightning strikes converged at once, roaring like a devastating tidal wave, its destructive might rivaling that of an early domain Lord Realm powerhouse. Heavenly Ox True Master, unrivaled in the world, Lord Tianyu Qinyu, you more than live up to the title of our Academy's foremost tutor. With strength like this, even a domain lord's full power wouldn't surpass it. Voices rang out across Tiangong Hall as the Academy's tutors stared in astonishment. Watching from the sidelines, foreign cultivators and beast clansfolk felt a new, boundless reverence for the War God Academy. A Saint King Realm cultivator capable of matching a domain lord was a phenomenon scarcely seen in all of history. Despite his status as a mentor at the War God Academy, Ye Cheng was by no means its strongest master. Even so, the gathered cultivators and mystical beasts couldn't help but murmur in admiration. The War God Academy truly deserves its reputation as Beihuang Shenzhou's supreme cultivation sanctuary. As they spoke, their eyes turned to Ye Cheng, filled with concern rather than awe. He hadn't made a single move, and before him crackled the terrifying killing intent of Tianyu Qinyu. No one believed Ye Cheng stood a chance. The purple-gold thunderstorm swept toward him like a raging tide. Yet instead of dodging, Ye Cheng merely curved his lips into a faint smile, took a steady step forward, and met the oncoming tempest head-on. In an instant, the storm swallowed him whole. He actually took the hit. He didn't even dodge. Does he want to die? The crowd gasped, unsettled by his calm. Even Tianyu Qinyu paused, a slight frown creasing his brow. He hadn't expected Ye Cheng to resist, much less face down the full fury of his thunder assault without flinching. Let him be. If he wants to die, that's on him. Tianyu Qinyu shook his head and let the thunderstorm surge crash into Ye Cheng. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3, 10 breaths passed, and still the lightning raged without relenting. Tianyu Qinyu's confident smirk faded. He'd been certain Ye Cheng couldn't survive a single blast, let alone 10. Something was wrong. A chill ran down Tianyu Qinyu's spine. He narrowed his eyes and sent his spirit probing into the heart of the storm to see why his assault hadn't shattered its target. No sooner had his consciousness slipped free than... boom! A thunderous roar split the air, freezing everyone in place. In the eye of the storm, where hundreds of bolts had once danced wildly apart, they now converged into a single, humming mass, an ominous formation that glowed with lethal power. A figure burst through the roar of thunder, cleaving instantly through the wall of hundreds of divine lightning bolts. When the storm cleared, there stood Ye Cheng, calm, unscathed, atop the churning tide of electricity. A 3-foot radius of potent sword aura shimmered around him like an invisible fortress. Each thunderbolt that slammed to that shimmering field disintegrated on contact, shattering into nothingness without so much as stirring the edge of his defense. "This is domain! Kendo domain!" A stunned hush fell over the entire square, followed by a rising chorus of astonished gasps. Even Tianyu Qinyu's eyes widened as he stared at Ye Cheng in disbelief, as if he'd glimpsed a specter. What audacity granted this youth such confidence and such power? Qinyu knew well the pride of his own clan's bloodline, unmatched in the realm of thunder cultivation. In only 10,000 years, he had broken into the realm of the Wei, mastering its entrance level and leaving most peers far behind. Yet here stood Ye Cheng, his exact cultivation unknown, but his age unmistakably young, and he had just unleashed a domain capable of nullifying hundreds of divine thunders. At most, he couldn't be 30 years old, and yet here he stood, already comprehending the realm. How was this possible? What kind of monster was his own mentor in the Killing Dao Hall? No mere human should possess such prodigious talent. Tianyu Qinyu's mind spun in panic. Then Ye Cheng's calm voice rang out. "Tianyu Qinyu, have you finished that move yet?" The question cut through the chaos like a blade. Tianyu Qinyu's blood boiled as he recalled Ye Cheng's earlier taunts. "If I had held back, I'd never have a chance to strike, would I?" He ground his teeth, unwilling to admit he'd misjudged his opponent. "You've only just stepped into the realm," he growled. "Don't think for a second that you can stand on equal footing with me." With a roar, Tianyu Qinyu unleashed every drop of spiritual power stored in his dantian. It surged outward, merging with his evolved thunder field. The heavens responded in kind, dark clouds roiled overhead, and a barrage of lightning rained down toward Ye Cheng. It was as if he had unleashed a divine calamity with his very presence, an otherworldly storm of thunder and lightning concentrated solely on Ye Cheng. From the lofty viewing platform, the assembled domain lords gazed on in stunned silence. "Incredible," one whispered. "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I'd never believe a Saint King could wield such power." As the furious bolts converged, Ye Cheng's figure was almost swallowed by the tempest. The crowd tensed, certain his end had come, until, against all expectation, he moved. "Stepping into the arena?" someone murmured. "Or is that you talking about yourself?" came the cold retort. At the same instant, the slender sword at Ye Cheng's waist slid free of its scabbard. Sword energy coiled around its blade like a coiling dragon, defying the raging storm. With a single fluid motion, he lifted the sword toward the heavens and unleashed a swift, elegant slash. Hua! The torrent of lightning shattered on the edge of his blade, dissipating as if struck by a heavenly barrier. Even Tianyu Qinyu, who had called down the tribulation, felt the backlash. He was hurled backward hundreds of feet, his arms flailing as thousands of shadowy sword winds descended on him in a lethal cascade. "No," the demigod roared, but already the outcome was sealed. "Ye Cheng, you dare to kill Lord Tianyu Qinyu? Ye Cheng, stand down at once, or you'll live to regret it." A deathly hush fell over the instructors of Tiangong Hall. If those thousands of sword chi blades truly descended, Tianyu Qinyu wouldn't just be injured, he'd be crippled for life if he survived at all. None of them wanted to witness such a catastrophe. Ye Cheng's lips curved into a cold sneer. "Regret it? Prove you can stop me." With the faintest flick of his wrist, he unleashed a blizzard of sword energy. Puff! Silver-edged currents of power rained from the sky, each gleaming blade slicing the air with lethal precision. In horror-filled eyes, Tianyu Qinyu saw his own defenses shatter, the Jiaotian meridian severed, the dantian pierced. "Ah!" he screamed, clutching at his wounded abdomen as he crumpled to the ground. Around him, gasps and shouts erupted, but Ye Cheng merely lowered his hand, expression unreadable, as the dust of battle settled. Chapter 508. "You dare attack me!" Qi Wenchuan's roar echoed across the hall, his chest heaving with furious indignation. He looked every inch the thunderous mentor, but beneath the bluster, his voice trembled with uncertainty. "Why wouldn't I?" Ye Cheng replied coolly, stepping forward without a hint of hesitation. "The Academy's rule is clear. A duel between mentor and student allows anything short of death. And let's not forget, your so-called senior brother has been gunning for me from the start. Qi Wenchuan's face reddened. Then why won't you face me when it's my turn to finish him off? Silence answered him. Under Ye Cheng's unwavering gaze, he had no retort. A faint, cold smile curved Ye Cheng's lips. If you refuse the challenge, feel free to step aside and let someone else avenge your precious senior brother. He swept his eyes over the masters of Tiangong Hall gathered around. And you, do any of you have the courage to stand against me? His gaze settled on the broken figure of Tianyu Quinyu, lying unconscious, his cultivation shattered, his future all but lost. Whether alive or dead, the fallen disciple would never rise again. The courtiers waited, breath held, as Ye Cheng's challenge hung in the charged silence. The Tiangong Hall instructors, so sure moments ago that Ye Cheng would pay dearly for his boldness, stood frozen, their mouths agape. None dared look him in the eye. A few timid souls even shuffled backward, but no one stepped forward to challenge him. Qi Wenchuan's face twisted with fury. He ground out, "Fine, you win today, Ye Cheng, but don't think this is over. When my senior brother returns, I expect you to have the courage to face him." With that, he whirled around, gathered the rest of the Tiangong Hall instructors, and hurried off to rescue Tianyu Quinyu, vanishing from the competition grounds in a blur. Even the students who'd been itching to enlist with Tiangong Hall abandoned their plans on the spot. A stunned silence fell over the arena. The other young prodigies, along with the assembled monks and mystical creatures who'd come to watch the ceremony, looked at one another in disbelief. None had foreseen such an ending. Then all eyes turned back to Ye Cheng. In their gazes shone a mix of awe, respect, and excitement. Today, he had not only won the contest, he had earned the admiration of every onlooker present. "Teacher Ye Cheng, we want to join you too. Please take us as your disciples." One student's bold shout was all it took. The group of new prodigies surged forward and knelt in unison before Ye Cheng. Their fervent display drew envious glances from the other instructors perched on the academy's viewing platform. And from the sword hall, Hong Yu and his fellow masters beamed with pride. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. But Ye Cheng hardly batted an eyelash. He had no desire to accept a crowd of students. Xiao Yiren by his side was more than enough. Besides, his monthly sermons at the academy already kept him busy. If he truly intended to take on disciples, he preferred selecting only those who proved themselves exceptional over time. He folded his arms and spoke calmly. "If you wish to learn swordsmanship under me, attend my monthly lectures at the academy. Should I recognize extraordinary talent among you, I will consider teaching you personally." With that, he fell silent, leaving the eager would-be disciples to ponder his offer. Ye Cheng signaled to Xiao Yiren, and together they slipped away from the competition grounds beneath the crowd's awestruck gazes. Soon they arrived at the killing hall, a cavernous chamber he'd hollowed into the mountainside. Xiao Yiren practically buzzed with excitement. After so long apart, she had dozens of stories to share. She bounded up to her father and began describing everything she'd experienced since leaving the wilderness. The whispering pines of the North Ridge, her first encounter with a spirit fox, and how she'd struggled to master even the simplest blade techniques. Ye Cheng listened quietly, genuinely intrigued. When Xiao Yiren paused for breath, he produced a delicate porcelain cup filled with steaming spiritual tea. "Here," he said softly, "slow down and sip your tea first." She gratefully accepted it, cradling the cup in her small hands. After a few soothing sips, she looked up at him, her big eyes clouded with concern. "Father, I've never actually met Aunt Yuroshue. She was supposed to arrive for this tournament. She even registered as a freshman competitor, but I never saw her. I don't know what's going on, or if something's gone wrong." Ye Cheng's expression softened. He reached out and tousled her hair. "There's no need to worry about unexpected troubles," he reassured her. "Aunt Yuroshue is in the midst of a critical retreat. She's channeling all her energy inward to prepare for what lies ahead. It's an essential process, strenuous but under control." Xiao Yiren exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders. Ye Cheng offered her a comforting smile and waved a hand gently. "Don't give it another thought," he said. "Everything will work out just fine." Polish chapter. Even though he hadn't seen Ye yet, Ye Cheng could clearly sense that the prodigious young girl was still inside Wandao Palace. Her aura was rock steady, and she seemed to be making breakthroughs almost daily. Since she hadn't appeared yet, she must be on the verge of a critical breakthrough in her cultivation. Midway through these thoughts, Ye Cheng's brow suddenly lifted. Xiao Yiren, sitting at his side, noticed immediately and grew anxious. "Daddy, what's wrong? Are you sensing Aunt Ruoshui's presence?" "It's not that," Ye Cheng said, patting her head gently. "I was just surprised by something unexpected after dealing with the Tianyu ox." He closed his eyes and drew his awareness inward. Within him lay the purple qi cauldron of all living beings, the vessel that gathered the world's fortune. At this moment, he could feel that the reservoir of purple luck qi had swelled once again, and the increase was substantial. Tracing the source of that surge, Ye Cheng realized it came from nothing more than his act of smashing the Tianyu ox's horn. He had destroyed, not killed, the beast, and yet his luck qi had skyrocketed. Ye Cheng allowed himself a faint, cold smile. The great demon bull, Tianyu Quinyu, no stranger to crushing the strongest heroes of the human realm, lay battered and exhausted at his feet. He had not delivered the killing blow. Instead, Ye Cheng had chosen a fate far crueler, the terror and pain of lingering, of knowing that escape was impossible. To the young cultivator, it felt like justice. No sooner had he savored this calm triumph than the towering doors of the killing hall swung open. A wave of familiar qi swept in, led by Hong Yu, the hall's respected mentor, followed by Ye Cheng's junior sister and several fellow disciples. "Brother Ye Cheng," Hong Yu called, his tone tight with concern. "We've come to check on you, and Yiren." "Mentor Hong Yu, everyone. You're welcome," Ye Cheng replied, stepping aside to let them enter. His smile never wavered. Once inside, Hong Yu's brow furrowed. He glanced at the crippled demon bull, then back at Ye Cheng. "You acted too hastily this time," he chided gently. "But that's done and over with. We're here now to advise you. Before you take your niece Yiren off on any adventures, you should first submit a formal mission request to the sect. Spend a few years traveling beyond the mortal realm, refine your skills, gain new insights, and only then return." He paused, searching Ye Cheng's face. "Of course, if you insist on staying here, that's your decision, but be aware of the consequences." Ye Cheng's lips curved into a confident grin. "Thank you for your advice, mentor. I understand the risks, but I have my own reasons for acting as I did." Hong Yu exchanged worried looks with the others. They knew better than to press him further, at least for now. As the disciples gathered around, Ye Cheng turned back to the trembling form of Tianyu Quinyu and raised his V, Oace. "Rest here," he told the demon bull. "Your suffering will end when you learn what it means to face true justice." With that, he signaled the young cultivators to stand guard. Whatever doubts they harbored, Ye Cheng was resolved. His path lay somewhere far beyond the killing hall's walls, and nothing, not even ancient protocol, would deter him from walking it. "We'll keep an eye on you," Hong Yu said, her tone solemn. "The moment we learn where Tiangong Hall's chief instructor is headed, we'll notify you. You can make your move then, and you'll have plenty of time." Ye Cheng nodded, a faint, confident smile playing on his lips. "Thank you for your concern, everyone. Rest assured, I chose to act today because I'm fully prepared." But Hong Yu and the others, well aware of how formidable the chief instructor of Tiangong Hall could be, weren't so easily put at ease. Hong Yu opened her mouth to urge him not to underestimate their enemy's threat, only to have him forestall her with a quiet, knowing smile. "Hong Yu," he said, meeting her eyes, "tell me, before today's contest, did you ever imagine I could defeat Tianyu Quinyu?" His words cut through the tension like a blade. In an instant, the group's lingering doubts and fears dissolved, replaced by stunned silence and a sudden, undeniable certainty. Ye Cheng was more than ready for whatever lay ahead. Half an hour later, Hong Yu and the other instructors finished briefing Ye Cheng on every detail concerning the chief of Tiangong Hall. With solemn bows exchanged, they took their leave and stepped out into the courtyard. A few of them hovered nearby, exchanging curious glances before one ventured. "Guide Hong Yu, tell us, if Brother Ye Cheng actually faces the chief of Tiangong Hall, what do you think his chances are?" Hong Yu hesitated. She knew well the chief's legendary record, countless triumphant battles, and, now, a cultivation level that would soon elevate him to domain master. Yes, Ye Cheng's defeat of Tianyu Quinyu had been nothing short of spectacular, but the opening odds still seemed against him. Under normal circumstances, she would have given him less than a 10% shot. Yet as she recalled the cool confidence in Ye Cheng's eyes, Hongyu found herself smiling. "If it's brother Ye Cheng," she said, her voice steady, "I honestly believe his chances exceed 50%. 50-50? The instructors exchanged surprised looks, only to find that none of them were actually surprised by Hongyu's answer. In fact, each of them found themselves silently nodding in agreement. Unwittingly, Ye Cheng had just won over nearly every member of the Killing Hall. Chapter 509, Hongyu and the others heaped praise on Ye Cheng, but privately, they still regarded his annihilation of the Tianyu Bull Demon as a spur-of-the-moment decision. They couldn't quite believe his insistence that he'd weighed every factor before striking, assuming instead that he'd said it just to soothe their worries. What they didn't know was that Ye Cheng spoke the truth. From the start, he had contemplated wiping out the Bull Demon entirely. He'd reasoned that defeating Qi Wenxuan alone would be enough to cement his reputation within the God of War Academy, and once his standing was secure, he, Xiao Yiren, and the rising star Yi Ruoshui could finally emerge from seclusion and train in peace, free from any unwanted interference. But as the trials progressed, Ye Cheng realized just how deeply rooted the Academy's power truly was, and how formidable his peers in the three halls had become. Simply besting Qi Wenxuan might not send the shockwaves through the martial world that he'd hoped for. Even more unsettling, Qi Wenxuan's own alliances and resources ran far deeper than Ye Cheng had ever anticipated. Even though he'd already defeated Tianyu Quinyu, Ye Cheng refused to rest easy. There was no guarantee that grasping opportunists, blinded by greed, wouldn't try to sabotage his cultivation to gain favor with Qi Wenxuan or the shadowy ancestor of the Tian Crocodile clan. Determined to make an unambiguous example of his foe, he killed the chicken to scare the monkeys, letting enough blood spill that Tianyu Qinyu's life became a fate worse than death. After such a warning, no one in their right mind would dare cross him again. With that settled, Ye Cheng summoned Hongyu and the others to explain everything in full. Once they'd been sent on their way, he turned to Xiao Yiren's astonishing haul. Over 200,000 war god points earned in a single battle. The cultivation treasures she could now claim were more abundant than ever before. On top of that, before arriving at the God of War Academy, the girl had spent months in seclusion at the Killing Dao Hall's Tower of Slaughtering Dao, and had just hit a critical bottleneck in her Dao comprehension. Now, with these fresh resources in hand, she stood poised to break through her limits at last. Ye Cheng had finally reached the moment he'd been preparing for, a decisive push toward the Emperor realm. He used his hard-earned God of War points to secure a vast cache of cultivation resources for the little girl, then arranged for her to seclude herself in his Changqing Hall. Though this hall lacked the sheer amplification power of the 10,000 Dao Palace, Ye Cheng's personal enhancements would still boost Xiao Yiren's cultivation speed by dozens of times. Coupled with the wealth of materials at her disposal, resources even a Saint King would envy, she was set to shatter the usual time limits on a Daozun's breakthrough. Where others might require years or even a decade to ascend to the Emperor realm, Ye Cheng confidently predicted she'd complete it within 6 months. With Xiao Yiren settled into her seclusion, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Now it was his turn. He made his way to the Killing Dao Hall's sacred stronghold, the Killing Dao Tower, and prepared to begin his own retreat, eager to seize his next step toward true mastery. The Killing Dao Tower had long been the pinnacle of martial training within the God of War Academy. Stretching skyward like a silver spire, it housed an unending host of spirit puppets, perfect recreations of northern wilderness champions, each forged from painstaking battle records. These constructs were supreme powerhouses in their own right, distilled embodiments of the Killing Dao. What set the tower apart was its adaptive cultivation system. By channeling the accumulated Dao essence of northern wilderness elites, the puppets could elevate their realm on demand. A junior practitioner might find themselves dueling a mid-rank fighter's specter, while a seasoned veteran could be tested by a world-class Kriya tie-in designed to push every skill and every Dao comprehension to its absolute brink. Ye Cheng crossed the threshold into the tower's vast training hall, where Elder Mingwell presided. Having overseen the Killing Dao Hall for decades, the elder knew every master whose likeness stood in bronze and spirit. He rose to greet Gu with a warm smile. News of the recent freshman tournament had spread like wildfire. Qi Wenchuan's ignoble defeat, Ye Cheng's stirring performance alongside his daughter, and the hushed wonder of the spectators at the opening ceremony. Recognizing Gu's potential, Elder Mingwell clasped his shoulder in welcome and began to outline the tower's trials, its hidden chambers, and the priceless Dao insights waiting within. Ye Cheng's heart skipped a beat as he listened to the Killing Dao Hall elder's introduction. He had assumed the Killing Dao Tower could only forge spirit puppets at the Dao Cheng realm, at best matching fighters who'd perfected their realm cultivation. To his astonishment, it could actually produce a Dao Cheng world. A puppet of that caliber, if supplied with enough spiritual fodder, could seriously threaten a realm master. That such an automaton could be created by the Killing Dao Tower spoke volumes about the War God Academy's foundations. Yet Ye Cheng found himself even more curious about Territory Master Yuan Sheng's own Dao attainment. As one of the Academy's vice presidents, Master Yuan Sheng must have put the tower through its paces many times over. Remembering the sheer power of Yuan Sheng's simulacrum in the Imitation Heaven Mirror, Ye Cheng quietly concluded, Senior Yuan Sheng's Dao has probably already ascended to the Dao Cheng world. He drew in a steadying breath, anticipation flaring in his chest. Ye Cheng watched Yuan Sheng, the domain master, settle into cultivation within the Killing Dao Tower. If Yuan Sheng could refine his Dao Cheng world attainments here, why shouldn't he? With that thought, Ye Cheng found a quiet corner and began to practice his sword intent. He resisted the urge to summon his world-class sword spirit puppet immediately. By the hall's rules, neither spirit puppet nor cultivator could exceed the early saint stage under normal circumstances. If he were to call forth a world-class blade now, without burning away his life force or invoking the Kangwu Immortal King's projection to shatter the tower's constraints, he would be cut down in a single stroke, gaining nothing in return. Instead, he approached the elderly hall attendant. Senior, he said with a slight bow, I'd like to request an opponent skilled in the Great Perfection sword domain. The attendant stiffened, jade hairpin glinting in the torchlight. Teacher Ye Cheng, did you really say the Great Perfection sword domain? Ye Cheng met his gaze steadily. Only by clashing with such an expert can I temper my sword intent properly. The attendant hesitated, then inclined his head. Very well. He produced a jade slip and tapped it on the palm of his hand. This challenger has reached mid-saint stage in the Great Perfection sword domain. Prepare yourself. Ye Cheng bowed once more and stepped onto the circular dual platform. As the spectral barrier rose around him, a cold hum filled the air. Beyond the translucent walls, a lone figure materialized, white-robed, eyes serene, sword qi trembling like steel mist. Ye Cheng drew his blade. In that instant, the Killing Dao Hall fell silent. The next clash would decide whose sword intent was truly supreme. Great accomplishment sword domain? Elder Mu's brow rose in surprise. As a mid-stage domain lord, whose Dao had been honed by the crucible of the Killing Dao Tower to a minor domain breakthrough, he knew exactly how vast the gulf was between domain levels, like the divide between heaven and earth. Ye Cheng's own domain mastery, at best, seemed only on par with his. Only moments ago, Tianyu Kunyu had fallen to him simply because even a one-level advantage in domain could be utterly decisive. That was why everyone who entered the Killing Dao Hall, no matter how vicious, always chose puppets whose domain rank matched their own. They never dared to flirt with disaster by facing a superior opponent, and yet here was Ye Cheng, asking to face a true master of the great accomplishment sword domain? Elder Mu couldn't help but glance at the assembled crowd. Whispers rippled through the hall. He'll be crushed. He doesn't stand a chance. But when he turned back, Ye Cheng was already standing calmly beneath the glowing rune circle, his expression serene. Elder, Ye Cheng said, his voice soft but unyielding. Please don't hold back. I want to give it a try. A flicker of doubt passed through Elder Mu's eyes. Never had he encountered such unshakable confidence in someone so clearly outclassed. Yet the rules were the rules. When a challenger requests an opponent, even one from a higher domain, the duel must proceed. The entire hall held its breath as Elder Mu stepped forward, his sword already humming with the power of the great accomplishment sword domain. The very air trembled. Ye Cheng lifted his own blade, a slight smile playing at his lips. He knew he was stepping into the lion's den, but he had no intention of backing down. Although Ye Cheng's Dao attainments in swordsmanship were modest, his arsenal of enhancements was nothing short of extraordinary. Chaos Sword Body, Chaos Body, Six Paths Reincarnation Body, Taichu Immortal Body, Tianlian Saint Body, plus the blessings of his fully cultivated Immortal Body. Boundaries that would choke even the most gifted geniuses were mere hurdles for him, and sparring with another minor sword domain practitioner would scarcely temper his skills. Seeing that unwavering confidence in Ye Cheng's eyes, the guarding elder had no choice but to honor the rules. He released the arena's restraints, activated the spirit puppet, and remained at the edge of the platform, unable to resist watching personally. What he witnessed next left him breathless. On the stage, Ye Cheng and his challenger, both masters at the sword level, erupted into a dazzling duel. Thousands of sword shadows fluttered through the air, blanketing the entire arena. Blades of light coiled and leaped like dragons, each arc bright as a rainbow. The sheer intensity of their sword chi strained the protective barriers to the breaking point, tearing at reality itself and plunging the battlefield back into wild chaos. Had their strengths truly been equal, the Guardian Elder would never have reacted so dramatically. What unsettled him was how, as the duel wore on, the balance of victory quietly tipped in Ye Cheng's favor. He stared in disbelief and muttered under his breath, "Could it really be that this is the work of a human prodigy?" Several days later, the Guardian Elder finally managed to calm himself. He lingered just long enough to watch Ye Cheng spar with the spirit puppet on the stage, the young man's sword strokes sharp and deliberate as he polished his technique. Realizing that staying any longer might spark rumors, suggesting he was attempting to recruit the youth, he discreetly took his leave. Though a master of the domain realm would never resort to such petty tactics, he couldn't risk the gossip. Even after he departed, the Guardian Elder's mind raced, filled with shock, awe, and an undeniable pride. In all his years within the killing hall, he had never witnessed anyone, let alone a human, display such talent. Word of Ye Cheng's performance would spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, far away in Tiangong Hall, an uneasy hush fell over the assembly, as if everyone there had suddenly realized they'd been holding their breath. From the moment Qi Wenchuan spoke, every instructor in Tiangong Hall wore a dark, stormy expression. Their grim faces seemed to drip with indignation. Ye Cheng, how could we possibly allow this disgrace to stand unavenged? Chapter 510. It's easy for you to say, but how are we supposed to report this? The Academy's rules are clear. If we clash, it won't just be us in trouble. Our families and clans will all be held accountable and face severe punishment from the Academy's High Council. The teacher's voice was cold as he glared at the Tiangong Hall instructor who'd called for retaliation against Ye Cheng. The man stammered, "I don't have any better ideas, but can't we at least swallow our pride? If we launch a direct assault, even Master Tianyu Quinyu would end up like that." Another Tiangong Hall teacher muttered, casting a fearful glance toward Tianyu Hall, where the fallen Tianyu Quinyu still lay. His voice shook with lingering dread. "We have no choice but to hold our tongues." "Enough! Silence!" Qi Wenchuan finally barked, his low roar cutting through the despondent murmurs. For a moment, it calmed the gathered instructors. But Qi Wenchuan still had no solution. Tiangong Hall had been humiliated and suffered a devastating blow. Not only were they stripped of Tianyu Quinyu, but their reputation lay in tatters. Many of the new Tianjiao who had originally planned to join Tiangong Hall, upon witnessing their instructors fall so disastrously, quietly drifted toward Wandao and Shadao Halls instead. It wasn't that these rising stars lacked ambition. They simply wanted to train under masters strong enough to uphold their hall's prestige. And yet, even the most indifferent among them could not bear to see Tiangong's mentors trampled beneath the feet of rival instructors. Qi Wenxuan felt a fierce anger welling in his chest. Just as he struggled to rein it in, a streak of spiritual light flashed past the main hall's open doors. It spiraled down to hover before the assembled instructors, then solidified into a shimmering talisman. Instantly, a gentle yet urgent consciousness streamed from it, spilling into the minds of every Tiangong Hall teacher. This is Senior Brother Ye Cheng's talisman, someone whispered, astonished. The talisman carries his voice. He's already chosen a site for seclusion and begun his retreat. He must have sent this just before withdrawing. By now, he may be deep in his private chamber. But he's taken every precaution. He's well prepared. A collective thrill of relief and hope swept through the hall. Eyes that had been dull with despair brightened as they drew in the talisman's energy. Qi Wenxuan pressed his hand to the glowing symbol, determination blazing in his gaze. With Ye Cheng's support, anticipated or already upon them, the Tiangong Hall instructors felt their spirits reignite. No longer would they be so easily overshadowed. The time to reclaim their honor had come. No more than 6 months, and he'll break through to the Domain Master realm and return from retreat. The gathered masters of Tiangong Hall stared in disbelief at the glowing talisman, Qi Wenxuan included. The Domain Master realm was a distant dream for most, one that normally took thousands, or even tens of thousands, of years to attain. And yet their senior brother was on the verge of achieving it in a single half-year. When he comes back, one of the instructors whispered fiercely, he'll trample Ye Cheng beneath his heel and restore our hall's honor. Don't forget, another reminded them, Master Tianyu Quinyu said he's also taken an extraordinary disciple. Between the two of them, Ye Cheng and his daughter won't know what hit them. They've disgraced Tiangong Hall once, a third vowed, and we'll see that they pay in full, father and daughter alike. Across the hall, murmurs of triumph swelled into outright celebration. Meanwhile, far to the east in Wandao Palace, their most sacred sanctuary of cultivation, Ye Ruoshui sat cross-legged atop a jade dais. Ancient treasures hovered before her in a perfect circle, each artifact pulsating with divine radiance. Immersed in profound meditation, she drew upon their power, oblivious to the excitement stirring back at Tiangong Hall. Ye Ruoshui had never seen such an overwhelming cache of treasures. Under normal circumstances, even for a newly minted Saint Emperor like her, absorbing this many natural artifacts would be impossible. A quasi-saint would struggle to process them in a lifetime. Yet with every passing 15 minutes, a full 10% of the hoard vanished as Ye Ruoshui absorbed and refined it. In less than half a day, she had consumed what would take a quasi-saint months to master, every last fragment fueling her cultivation and sharpening her aura. She never even opened her eyes. With a single thought, her storage ring sprang to life. Its interior stretched outward into a vast expanse, as large as a small city. Tens of thousands of treasures soared forth, hovering before her in midair. Immediately, they were drawn into her being, their power flowing like a river into her soul. As the energy poured in, her aura climbed to new heights, and a subtle transformation began. Her skin, already smooth and pale as jade, grew even more translucent, radiating a soft inner glow. In that moment, she resembled a living sculpture of divine stone, every pore shimmering with cultivated power. If Ye Cheng were here, he would instantly recognize what was happening to Ye Ruoshui. She was undergoing the exact same metamorphosis he had experienced when he first crossed the Chaos Sea and arrived on the northern wilderness divine continent. In that instant, she was shedding her mortal shell and forging an immortal body. This miracle was the work of her fairy spirit heavenly gift destiny. With such a fate, she needed no external treasures or pills. Once her cultivation realm was high enough, she could perfect an immortal body, even ascend to a grand immortal body or a flawless immortal body. Before Ye Ruoshui entered the War God Academy, her destiny had indeed awakened, but she lacked the resources to develop it. Even inheriting the legacy of Yuanyue Zhenxian hadn't taught her how to translate that treasure into true martial might. Everything changed the moment she joined the academy and took refuge in Wandao Hall and Wandao Palace. Under the careful tutelage of Palace Master Mo Jinyi, she finally understood the essence of her fate and her own true path. From that point on, her strength leapt forward in giant strides. Today, she stands at the Saint Emperor level, only the first milestone in what promises to be a boundless ascent. Ye Cheng could crush a quasi-saint with ease, let alone a full saint. And this wasn't even her true peak. If she withdrew for another 50 years at most, equivalent to 100-fold Wandao Palace blessing or 6 months cultivation in the mortal world, she could break the bottleneck, ascend to Emperor, and finally forge her immortal body. By then, her strength would rival the Saint Lord's. A flicker of determination lit her eyes. Suddenly, a resonant boom echoed through the Yuanling's secret realm. In that instant, a gleaming suit of azure armor materialized around her. Intricate Tao runes pulsed along its plates, and the moment it settled onto her shoulders, her aura surged upward, leaping from the early Saint Emperor stage to the early Emperor stage. This was her greatest prize in the secret realm, the Yuanling Tao armor, left behind by the Yuanling True Immortal. It had been her trusty companion when she once conquered the northern wilderness, and now it had elevated Ye Cheng to a whole new realm of power. The Tao armor has now risen to the dominant class, and it has acknowledged Ye Cheng as its sovereign. Even though her cultivation rests at only the Emperor realm, she can still don the armor. She'll merely unlock 1/1,000,000th of its true power. Yet, that sliver of energy is more than enough to push her cultivation to an entirely new plateau. Clad in this sect-forged armor, Ye Cheng knew that when she emerged from seclusion, she would combine her Emperor-level base, the blessings of her immortal body, and the Yuanling Tao armor's might. "My strength will rival that of a quasi-saint," she whispered to herself. "My killing power alone will place me above every domain, Lord." She remembered Yuan Jinyi's warning. Even within the legendary God of War Academy, a single domain lord could sweep aside the 3 hallmasters without effort. Such power must never be underestimated, and soon she would wield it herself. Chapter 12. "Give me 6 months, Ye Cheng declared, her voice unwavering, and my strength will be more than enough to protect His Highness Ye Cheng. Let anyone who dares insult him face my wrath." Her eyes shone with fierce resolve, and if he was honest, Ye Cheng could detect a trace of fond nostalgia. He suppressed a smile. This spirited young woman had grown immeasurably since he first rescued her. 3 months sped by in the blink of an eye. In the Hall of the Killing Tao, Ye Cheng finished his final trial atop the Tower of the Killing Tao. After exchanging nods of respect with the Elder Guardian, he stepped down onto the courtyard's stone floor. He planned to head next to the Wandao Palace to review the latest intelligence gathered by the God of War Academy, reports on hidden natural treasures, progress on his daughter's martial training, and, most importantly, to learn when Ye Cheng might emerge from her retreat. As he turned to leave, a familiar aura drifted past the entrance to the Wandao Palace. Ye Cheng paused, sensing Ye Cheng still deep in seclusion. A small smile tugged at his lips. He wondered to himself, when this extraordinary girl finally did emerge, what new realm of power would she have attained? With that question lingering in his mind, Ye Cheng strode off toward the palace, eager to chart his next moves, and to witness firsthand the blossoming strength of his young protege. Ye Cheng barely had time to exhale when a sudden shift in his awareness alerted him to Xiao Yiren's presence. More alarming still was the oppressive aura of the Saint King realm bearing down on his daughter, its intent unmistakably hostile. "Who dares to threaten my daughter?" he demanded, his voice ice-cold as he fixed his gaze on the intruder. Chapter 511. Just half a day before Ye Cheng emerged from his retreat, a group of senior students had already gathered before the War Merit Hall. In the God of War Academy, this grand building served as the hub for receiving academy assignments and earning war merit points, an indispensable currency for every disciple. Even the upperclassmen, revered for their skills, guarded their point totals fiercely. Only a select few seniors earned the right to compete in the freshman tournament. The rest must amass points by tackling the same series of missions assigned to new recruits. Every academy task is calibrated to forge stronger warriors. Novices see a high volume of relatively easy missions, while the more powerful students receive fewer but far more perilous assignments and commensurately richer rewards. Most seniors thrive on the challenge, pushing their limits to claim greater glory. Yet there are always some who, secure in their family's influence, seek loopholes, picking only the safest, borderline legal tasks to pad their point balances without risking too much. Just then, a team of these cautious veterans reappeared from an off-campus mission and loitered in front of the War Merit Hall, their expressions equal parts relief and calculation, already plotting which easy assignment they could claim next. Ye Cheng, though still deep in his retreat, would soon return to find the same familiar struggles awaiting him, and this time he intended to play by his own rules. Ye Cheng stood among the new students, watching as more than a dozen seniors, both human and alien, male and female, formed a wall before the Battle Merit Hall. Each radiated a potent aura, their reputations matching those of the elites Xianxia had defeated in the freshman tournament, and none less formidable than Ling Fengshui herself. Now they blocked every freshman eager to claim a mission, eyes gleaming with self-assured intent. One tall senior spoke first, his tone all faux concern. As your senior brothers and sisters, we can't just let you novices stumble into danger. You've barely begun your training, and these academy assignments are far too risky on your own. He swept an arm toward the hall's entrance. So for the next few months, we'll accompany you on every mission, guaranteeing your safety. No need to worry about threats. A silver-haired girl stepped forward with a sly smile. Naturally, our guidance comes at a price. All the merit points you earn on these tasks will go directly to us. And to show your gratitude, each of you will chip in an extra 100 points per assignment. Ye Cheng felt his blood boil as murmurs rippled through the freshmen. When the seniors fell silent, a young prodigy with a roguish grin let out a soft chuckle. "Seems fair, doesn't it?" he said, utterly shameless. Ye Cheng stood with his fellow first-year disciples at the entrance to the War Merit Hall, tension coiling in his chest. Before them, a group of senior students blocked the gate, among them one in particular who radiated an almost oppressive aura. His cultivation had already reached Emperor Perfection, a full step above Ling Fengshui's renowned prowess, and rivaled even a mid-stage quasi-saint. The senior raised his chin and let his gaze sweep slowly over the assembly of freshmen. His voice rang out, cool and insolent. "Who dares to enter before we give the order?" A hush fell over the newcomers. Instinctively, several of them glanced toward the War Merit Hall's doors, hoping to catch the attention of an elder inside. But those heavy bronze doors remained firmly barred by the senior squad's comrades, and the deacons on guard dared not intervene. Each deacon knew these seniors came from powerful lineages, Saint Perfection masters surely backing them, and thus pretended not to see the freshmen's plight. Desperation flickered across many young faces. A handful of more timid disciples bowed their heads, preparing to yield. Yet others, Ye Cheng among them, stood their ground, jaws set with stubborn resolve. He felt the heat of his own blood, the urge of pride that would not let him submit so easily. The Emperor Perfection senior's lips curled into a mocking smile. "I said, step aside, or face the consequences." His tone brooked no argument. Ye Cheng inhaled slowly, scanning the gate, the deacons, the onlookers. Honor and fear warred within him. He knew what was expected of a true disciple, to persevere, no matter the odds. And so, lifting his chin to meet the senior's challenge, he prepared to defend his right to pass through the War Merit Hall, come what may. "Listen up, seniors," a determined freshman called out, stepping forward from the assembly. "We all know the Academy limits both the number of missions we can accept each year and the war god points we can earn. Miss even one assignment, and we fall behind our classmates, let alone several months' worth of missions." He clenched his fists, voice steady. "If you're short on points, we'll each contribute 100 war god points as a gift. But please, leave the next few months of missions to us. We're eager to prove ourselves." A ripple of agreement ran through the gathered freshmen. Song Yue's face darkened at the challenge. He'd been away on training and field work for some time, and it seemed his reputation had waned. Seeing the juniors stand up to him only stung his pride further. Nearby, Senior Wang Mo chuckled. "Looks like your time away hasn't done you any favors, Song Yue. These kids don't even flinch when you threaten them." Song Yue's cheeks flushed as a burly senior, tasked with holding the line, joined in the laughter. "All right, Wang Mo, that's enough," he said, though his grin remained mocking. At that moment, the crowd's murmur died down as the Academy's senior leader, Ye Cheng, emerged through the stone gate. His calm, authoritative presence immediately commanded silence. Dark eyes swept over the cluster of students until they landed on Song Yue and Wang Mo, who fell back slightly under his gaze. "Enough," Ye Cheng said softly but firmly. "Song Yue, Wang Mo, step aside. Freshmen, your proposal will be considered. You may disperse." Without another word, the students parted. Ye Cheng gave a single nod, then turned and strode toward the main hall, the assembly breaking up behind him in respectful silence. Ye Cheng stepped onto the practice field in simple, coarse linen, more monk than martial artist. Yet the instant he appeared, a frigid, imperious aura rippled outward, freezing every breath in the chest of the onlookers. The raw-faced freshmen at the front shrank back, and even the senior students along the sidelines swallowed hard, unwilling to draw his notice. He advanced with steady, deliberate steps until he stood before the new recruits. Raising a single hand, he unleashed a terrifying surge of power, Saint Path caliber, that slammed into the assembled freshmen like a tidal wave. Dozens of them crumpled to their knees under the invisible weight. Whispers raced through the crowd. This junior brother, scarcely a few centuries into his cultivation, had shattered the emperor threshold and broken into the quasi-saint realm. "My brothers and sisters," Ye Cheng's voice rang out, calm, yet charged with an authority none could challenge. "I bear you no ill will. All I ask is that you show respect to my senior and refrain from causing him trouble." Silence stretched across the field. Even the most headstrong freshman dared not raise a hand against him. Ye Cheng, dressed in simple hemp robes, had already achieved the quasi-saint realm, an honor that put him at the very top of the Academy's senior students. Any freshman stupid enough to rile him up wouldn't only hit a temporary roadblock, they'd risk stalling their entire future at the God of War Academy. Their reputation points would vanish for months, and the gap between them and both the veterans and their fellow prodigies would only grow wider. Humiliated and resentful, the new students bowed their heads in silence. Ye Cheng exhaled a low, measured sigh. Raising a hand, he looked at them with a strange mixture of pity and resolve. "Why do you idiots always leave me no choice?" The moment his words rang out, the oppressive weight of his quasi-saint aura surged, and the freshmen's hearts clenched with ice-cold fear. The leader of the freshmen backed away with his hands raised. "Senior, please, don't do this. We'll do whatever you ask." But the young man in the hemp-colored robe only smiled coldly. "Too late for apologies. Time to teach you a lesson." He thrust out his palm, and in an instant, a beam of rippling light and shadow shot forward, spanning nearly 100 feet. Though he called it a light strike, its force was enough to make even a seasoned saint flinch. If it landed, these new students would be bedridden for months. The freshmen' faces drained of color. "This is it," one whispered, despair twinkling in their eyes. Before the blow could fall, a clear, scolding voice rang out from above. "Who do you think you are, Junior, daring to call me senior brother?" In the next moment, Xiaoyuan appeared, her scarlet gown billowing like living flame. With a single graceful leap, she positioned herself between the aggressor and the freshman. She raised her slender, energy-wreathed fist and met the oncoming palm shadow head-on. Upon impact, the shimmering projection shattered instantaneously into motes of dissipating light. Silence fell for a heartbeat, broken only by the crackle of residual energy in the air. The freshmen stared in stunned relief, and even the young man in hempcloth's grin froze as he regarded his unexpected foil. Chapter 512. "What? You actually blocked my attack, Gouche?" The entire senior group froze. Gouche, clad in simple hempcloth, glared at the freshman in stunned disbelief. His signature strike, designed to crush any newcomer, had been stopped dead by Ye Cheng's defense. For months, Gouche and his entourage had endured grueling drills outside the academy, hoping to amass enough war merit points to trade for a supreme treasure that would catapult Gouche into the mid-quasi-saint realm. Yet despite their efforts, they still fell short. Back at the God of War Academy, they resorted to their usual tactic, ambushing freshmen in the War Merit Hall. It was a century-old tradition: prey on naive first years, harvest their points, and watch your own strength soar. Thanks to this ruthless strategy, Goucher had vaulted into the Quasi-Saint stage in record time and secured his place as the Academy's top senior. To him and his cohort, every freshman was nothing more than a fat lamb, ripe for the taking. So predictable, so profitable, until now. None of them had expected Ye Cheng to be the wild card. As Goucher's jaw dropped, the other seniors exchanged bewildered looks. Their carefully honed operation had just encountered an unforeseen variable, and that variable was a freshman named Ye Cheng. I never imagined there'd be an anomaly in a century-old reincarnation. Ye Cheng drew a steadying breath, his eyes flashing as he regarded Guyirin. A thin, sinister smile curved his lips. "Junior sister," he said, "you did admirably just now, so I'll offer you a chance. Turn around and leave this place at once. If you do, I'll pretend I said nothing. If you refuse, well, don't blame me for preying on the weak." Preying on the weak? Guyirin's laugh was scornful. Without hesitation, she shot into the air, spearheading the offense. "Then try me if you dare." At her challenge, Ye Cheng's expression hardened. Spiritual energy erupted around him, rippling outward like a living storm. He thrust his hand forward, and hundreds of shimmering palm shadows exploded from his fingertips, blotting out the sky as they hurtled toward Guyirin. In the same instant, the air behind her split open. From the rift stepped a spirit projection of Ye Cheng, whose coalescing aura formed into a colossal, venom-dripping python nearly 100 feet long. With blinding speed, it lunged at Guyirin's back, fangs bared. "Elder sister Guyirin, watch out!" The group of young geniuses whom Guyirin had recently saved cried out in alarm, their hearts pounding as they witnessed the deadly ambush unfolding before them. Chapter 17. The New Champion. The moment the freshman tournament ended, Ye Cheng stood triumphant atop the leaderboard with an astonishing 270,000-plus points. Overnight, he became the undisputed leader of this year's new prodigies at the God of War Academy, earning the reverent title Senior Brother from every incoming freshman. Now, Ye Cheng faced off against Goucher, already advanced into the Quasi-Saint realm, in a dazzling display of power. From the sidelines, a chorus of anxious underclassmen shouted warnings, urging him to defend against Goucher's swift, lethal strikes. But Goucher moved faster than their cries. A blur of slashing palm techniques combined with the coiling form of a giant, venomous python. Ye Cheng braced himself. He raised his forearms just in time to intercept Goucher's palm shadows. The force of the blow rippled through his arms, but held firm. Before he could recover, the snake made its strike, fangs bared, dripping deadly poison, lunging at his side. "Junior brother," Goucher taunted, "you're still too inexperienced to stand against me." His mocking laughter died on his lips the instant the serpent's venom struck Ye Cheng's skin. Instead of sagging beneath the toxin's power, Ye Cheng remained as steady as a mountain peak. The underclassmen gasped, unable to comprehend how he could remain unshaken. Silently, Ye Cheng's eyes narrowed. He surged forward in a single fluid motion, closing the distance between him and Goucher in the blink of an eye. With a roar, he gathered every ounce of his true chi into his fist, his knuckles glowing with soft pink radiance. Then, with bone-shattering force, he brought his fist down. The impact shattered Goucher's body protection array like glass under a hammer. Magic barriers exploded into motes of light, and Goucher himself reeled backward, his expression frozen in disbelief. Ye Cheng stood over him, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Around them, the Academy's courtyard fell deathly silent, the freshmen dumbstruck at the impossible turn of events. In that solemn hush, one truth rang clear. This year's greatest freshman was no mere newcomer. He was a force to be reckoned with. Ye Cheng's fist struck Goucher's jaw with a bone-shattering crack. In an instant, teeth flew across the courtyard, and Goucher's face slammed into the pavement, gouging a deep crater in front of the War Merit Hall. Jigoushi. The circle of senior students who'd been sneering at the freshmen froze in horror. Their leader lay motionless, his face a mask of broken bone and blood. "Is he really just a freshman?" one of them stammered. "He knocked down Senior Goucher with a single punch," another whispered, voice trembling. "That kind of strength, you'd expect it only from a top senior." Ye Cheng's gaze swept over the stunned group. Calm and unflinching, he said, "Apologize for harassing the new students." Songyue, the most arrogant among them until moments ago, forced a shaky smile. Ye Cheng, perhaps we can talk this through. Before he could finish, Ye Cheng moved. In the blink of an eye, he was upon them, his next blow flashing like lightning. Songyu and the others realized too late how shameless they'd been, mocking freshmen, commandeering their supplies, and claiming superiority simply because they were seniors. But Ye Cheng had come to put an end to their reign of bullying, and they would learn that respect cannot be stolen or demanded. It must be earned. As the eldest sister among the freshmen, Xiao Yiren could have walked away and saved herself the trouble. But having stumbled upon a group of upperclassmen preying on the weaker students, her sense of justice would not allow her to turn her back. Precocious yet still innocent at heart, she simply refused to stand aside. Thwack, thwack, thwack! One by one, the bullies, regardless of rank or reputation, were on the receiving end of Xiao Yiren's swift fists. Each blow sent them sprawling backward until they all crashed into their leader, Ye Cheng. Around him, his cronies lay heaving on the ground, coughing up blood, their uniforms torn and faces contorted in shock. A growing chorus of cheers and applause rose from the students gathered outside the battle hall. Good, keep going, someone called. Show them mercy? You've got to be kidding, another jeered. Ye Cheng blinked awake, his vision swimming as he took in the ruined forms of his followers and the sea of angry faces surrounding him. His pride stung worse than any bruise. Spotting Xiao Yiren, standing tall and unafraid, something inside him snapped. With a roar of fury, he slammed his fist against the jade communication token at his waist, shattering it into pieces. Silence fell. The glittering shards tinkled onto the stone steps as everyone held their breath, waiting to see what he would do next. Crack! The jade token snapped in two, its pieces clattering onto the courtyard stones. The senior disciples, stunned moments before by Xiao Yiren's sudden strike, blinked back to awareness. And then their faces twisted into cruel grins. Well now, little junior sister, one drawled, stepping forward, you must be kidding yourself if you think you can walk away from this. Once word gets out that you dared to hurt Ye Cheng, you'll wish you'd never shown your face here, another sneered. And trust me, you won't like how Saint Lord Guling handles rule breakers. They'd all seen Ye Cheng crush the broken token. It was the communication jade bearing the seal of Saint Lord Guling, esteemed instructor of Tiangong Hall at the God of War Academy. More than that, Guling was Ye Cheng's mentor and great-uncle, fiercely devoted to protecting his young disciple. The moment he learned someone had harmed Ye Cheng, he'd wield every academy regulation like a blade. Ha! One of them laughed. With Guling's clout, he can have you disciplined however he likes, completely by the book. You'll be sorry you ever crossed him. Their mockery rolled through the courtyard, until a sudden whoosh of wind cut it short. An aura of raw power swept over the assembled students, tumbling lanterns and stirring dust into a swirling vortex. All at once, every eye snapped to the steps of the War Merit Hall, where a towering figure had just appeared, aura blazing. Silence fell as the intruder advanced, and even the most confident scoffers took an involuntary step back. Guling's arrival was like a thunderclap. The elder stalked into the courtyard in a flowing purple robe, his white hair billowing behind him. Though his years must have numbered 8 or 9 decades, his presence crackled with authority. Every hoofprint in the dusty ground seemed to tremble beneath him. Who dares lay a hand on my disciple? Guling's voice boomed, spirit energy rippling outward in a visible wave. Step forward and apologize at once. He halted mid-sentence, though, when he recognized who stood before Goucher. The young man with smudged robes and faint bruises on his cheek met his gaze unflinchingly. Ye Cheng! Guling's words caught in his throat, his eyes widening as if he'd seen a ghost. Ye Cheng lifted his chin, cool and composed. You want an apology, granduncle? He asked, his voice calm enough to sharpen the tension in the air. Goucher's face flushed. Surrounded by his younger brothers, each of whom watched the standoff with a mix of fear and indignation, he scrambled to his feet. Granduncle, look how arrogant he still is. Please, you must teach him a lesson for your grandson's sake. Before Goucher could even finish pleading, Guling's palm shot out. A crisp slap rang through the courtyard, and Goucher reeled backward, his cry cut short. He stumbled over the edge of the hidden pit Ye Cheng had cunningly dug, disappearing with a surprised shout into the darkness below. Silence reigned for a heartbeat. Then Guling turned on his heel and strode away, purple robes swirling, leaving a hushed courtyard and a very embarrassed Gu She at the bottom of a hole he'd meant for someone else. Ye Cheng simply dusted his sleeves, tucked his hands behind his back, and waited, unruffled, unbeaten, ready for whatever came next. Chapter 513. A collective gasp rose from the courtyard as Saint Lord Guling's palm flew out and struck his nephew, Ye Cheng, squarely in the chest. Ye Cheng crumpled to the ground. The young disciples standing behind him froze in stunned silence, unable to believe their eyes. Even more shocking was Guling's next move. He turned, a gentle smile on his lips, and addressed the academy's convener, Xiao Yiren, in an almost apologetic tone. No, student Yiren, he began, lowering his voice as if begging for understanding. My nephew here acted recklessly. He attacked the freshman class without cause. You were only upholding our academy's rules. You did exactly what was right. He swept a cold glance over the dozen or so disciples who had accompanied Ye Cheng. At his gaze, they instinctively shrank back, as powerless as ants before a mountain. Guling did not pause to give them a chance to explain. With a few precise palm strikes, he sent them tumbling into the nearby pit, the same abyss where Ye Cheng lay battered at the bottom. Guling met Xiao Yiren's eyes once more, his expression solemn. Rest assured, student Yiren, I will control these men from now on. What happened today will never be allowed again. Guling's heart still thundered in his chest. His nephew and disciples had been fools, utterly unaware of Princess Yiren's true standing. On her own, the little princess might not have seemed formidable, but her father was the very man who had dared to depose Tianyu Queenyu. Even Guling himself, famed as a war god mentor and powerful saint, was nothing compared to Yiren's sire. Who in their right mind would provoke that father and daughter? Terror washed over him, and beside him, Gu She and the other senior students froze, as if caught in a waking dream. Then, with a whisper of wind, a blade of radiant light swept the courtyard. A slender figure emerged, every movement suffused with heroic grace and transcendent power. It could only be Ye Cheng. "Daddy!" Yiren cried, abandoning all restraint. She darted forward like a swift swallow and buried herself in her father's arms. "My dear Yiren, what happened just now?" Ye Cheng asked, folding her into a warm embrace. Yiren's eyes sparkled as she immediately began to recount every detail of the encounter. Ye Cheng listened quietly to his daughter's account. When she finished, his gaze drifted to teacher Guling. A polite smile curved his lips, but his eyes were ice-cold. "Teacher Guling," he said evenly, "do you truly believe my daughter is in the wrong and owes you an apology?" Guling's face went ashen. He dropped to his knees, bowing repeatedly, his voice trembling with desperation. "Miss Yiren, please tell teacher Ye Cheng that no apology was ever demanded of her." Xiao Yiren, still smarting from Guling's and Gu Shi's earlier insults, nevertheless refused to lie. She met her father's eyes and nodded. "That's right. Once he realized who I was, he never asked me to apologize." A slow, almost imperceptible smile crossed Ye Cheng's face. This was exactly the outcome he'd intended when he abolished the Tianyu Queenyu contest, and precisely how he meant to expose the shamelessness of Gu Shi and his clique. His glance swept over the group huddled before him. Gu Shi and the others crouched like frightened animals, their faces streaked with shame. Not one dared raise his eyes. Ye Cheng inclined his head once, decisively. They would pay for today's disgrace, and for everything that had led up to it. Gu Shi and the others no longer dared to hope that Master Guling would value or train them in the future. They'd received exactly the punishment they deserved, and Ye Cheng had no interest in arguing the point. He simply cast a sidelong glance at Guling. "Master Guling," he said quietly, "I trust you'll keep your word and truly take care of your disciples and the younger generation of the clan from now on." "Absolutely, Brother Ye Cheng. You have my word. Don't worry." Guling practically bowed himself into the ground, relief flooding his face. Only when Ye Cheng Ned and walked away with his daughter, Xiao Yiren, did Guling finally let out a long, shuddering breath. From the depths of the pit, Gu Shi and his followers dared to peek out. Their eyes followed Ye Cheng and the girl in stunned silence. "What's happening with them?" one gasped. "They were gone." "What? Just a few months? Not hundreds of years," another murmured, head spinning in confusion. Watching them gape, Guling's anger reignited. He snorted in disgust. Idiots! You prance around without understanding a single thing. Useless fools, the lot of you. They're useless at everything, but they sure know how to stir up trouble. At his great-uncle's harsh words, Goucher, proud of his family status, couldn't hold back any longer. Leaning on his lineage, he shot back. Great-uncle, even if my grandson made a mistake, isn't Ye Cheng just his mentor? Why are you so scared of him? The great-uncle thundered. Goucher bristled. He's only a mentor. So what? A mocking smile curved Guling's lips. Do you even know what this mentor did before you all returned? Not a clue, Goucher admitted, glancing at the others, who shook their heads in equal ignorance. Guling's eyes gleamed. Then perhaps you've heard of Tianyu Quinyu? Yes, wait. Goucher's voice faltered as he exchanged looks with the other former Tiangong Hall disciples. They all recognized the name at once. Tianyu Quinyu was renowned as one of the Hall's greatest mentors. The realization hit them like a cold wind. Could it be true that this Ye Cheng could actually hold his own against Lord Tianyu Quinyu? Someone muttered in disbelief. Guling's lips curved into a mocking grin as he stepped forward. Hold his own? Lord Tianyu Quinyu is already a cripple. Eyes widened. What do you mean? With a theatrical shrug, Guling announced, it was this very man, Ye Cheng, who struck Lord Tianyu with a single blow so devastating that it severed all his meridians and shattered his dantian. He's lost his cultivation forever. A stunned hush fell over the onlookers. Goucher's face drained of color. Impossible. But Ye Cheng paid their shock no heed. He turned and led Xiao Yiren toward the great doors of the Wandao Hall. This venerable hall was more than just the academy's training ground. Its senior instructors not only guided the empire's most gifted practitioners, but also collected Beihuang Shenzhou's ancient treasures and guarded its deepest mysteries. No place was richer in arcane lore or more suited for serious cultivation. Ye Cheng knew that Yi Ruoshui would remain in seclusion for quite some time. His sole purpose in coming today was to secure a secluded, well-equipped chamber where he and Xiao Yiren could train. In the past 3 months, Xiao Yiren's progress had been nothing short of astonishing. Any day now, he could shatter the bottleneck and ascend to the ranks of the Xuan emperors. And here, within Wandao Hall's vast archives and private practice rooms, was exactly where they would make that breakthrough. After Ye Cheng's instruction, Xiao Yiren made no attempt to force her breakthrough. Most cultivators ascending to the Emperor realm gather myriad Dao seeds to reinforce their Dao spirit platform and lay a supreme foundation, he had explained. But as an Emperor flame body, Xiao Yiren's path was different. She forges her Dao base by devouring heaven and earth divine fires. To build the strongest Emperor foundation, she needs 5 distinct divine flames, and she's still too short. Dispatching Xiao Yiren alone to track down such rare treasures, even with an escort, would be fraught with danger and terribly inefficient. As her father and guardian, Ye Cheng naturally decided to take matters into his own hands. After surveying countless possibilities, he finally settled on a single destination. The All Saints Cemetery is unquestionably the ideal place, he declared, his eyes blazing with resolve. Chapter 514. The All Saints Cemetery lay sealed at the very edge of the northern wilderness, a forbidden realm whispered to be alive with deadly traps, savage spirits, and unspeakable power. Yet for every lurking danger, there was an equal measure of opportunity, and none more sought after than the legendary heaven and earth divine fire said to slumber in its depths. A decade ago, Lord Qi Wenxuan had enticed young Xiao Yiren into his service with the hollow promise of studying that very flame. It was the perfect bait, bold, irresistible, and entirely empty. Qi Wenxuan never intended to open the cemetery's gates for another 10 years. But Ye Cheng, Xiao Yiren's master, and her father refused to wait. In just 3 short months, Xiao Yiren's cultivation had soared to astonishing heights. Ye Cheng himself had spent the same period in the Dao of Slaughter Tower, not advancing his raw power, but refining his sword domain technique until it sliced through the air like lightning. His cultivation level remained unchanged, but his control of space, of angles, of every nuance of the blade had become peerless. All that stood between him and the next great leap was true combat, an ordeal no spirit puppet or phantom projection could replicate. The All Saints Cemetery was the only proving ground worthy of such a test. Clutching the hilt of his blade, Ye Cheng stared northward into the haunted wastes. Tomorrow, he and Xiao Yiren would breach the forbidden perimeter and face whatever horrors lay within. Their final trial had begun. My current combat strength is already enough to match a realm master in a standard duel, Ye Cheng mused, eyes glinting with ambition. Once I've amassed more real battle experience and brought my sword art to full fruition, even an early-stage realm master won't stand a chance against me. Yet it wasn't just the promise of fighting foes that drew him to the Cemetery of the Saints. More than anything, he hungered after the whispered legend of the Supreme Tao Seed. Among all the Tao Spirit Seeds, the Supreme Tao Seed is the rarest and the most coveted. In their entire lives, even luminaries like the former Yuanwu Saint and the venerable Tianhuang Zhenxian encountered no more than 2. Years ago, within the hidden depths of Yuanwu Mansion, Ye Cheng himself unearthed one such seed. He fused it into his own flesh and blood, forging a Tao foundation few could rival. And from that same mansion, he claimed a priceless manual, the Seed Tao Jue. With this secret art in hand, the moment he ascends to Emperor rank, he will be able to perfectly refine any supreme Tao seed he finds, elevating his cultivation to unprecedented heights. With just one more supreme Tao seed, I can elevate all 7 of my Tao spirit seeds to that same lofty tier. 9 supreme Tao seeds in total, my foundation and potential would soar to unprecedented heights, and my strength would leap forward again. Anticipation thrummed through Ye Cheng's veins as he looked toward the looming desert ahead. Beyond those dunes lay the Cemetery of All Saints, where countless treasures and untold dangers awaited. High above the boundless sea and shifting sands of the northern wilderness, a spirit boat cleaved through space itself, tearing open the void before settling onto the dunes. On its deck stood 2 figures, Ye Cheng and his daughter, Yiren. They had departed Ares Academy days ago and braved relentless storms and spirit beasts to arrive at this moment. Ye Cheng scanned the horizon, wind tugging at his robes. "The void vortex we need lies deep within that desert," he said, gesturing to a distant haze where sand and sky blurred together. "Beyond it, the tombs of saints and immortal cultivators await our arrival." Yiren's eyes gleamed with determination. "Let's go, father." Together, they stepped off the spirit boat and into the ever-shifting sands, ready to uncover the cemetery's hidden secrets and to test Ye Cheng's newly imagined power. Ye Cheng's voice echoed softly through the mist. "Once you step inside, the vortex will spit you out at a fixed point in the chaos sea. That's where the Cemetery of All Saints drifts, like a shattered continent suspended in nothingness, its ruins the tomb of countless warriors." He drew his fingers into the classic 2-finger sword gesture, a pale, wavering blade of energy snapping into being. With a flick of his wrist, he pressed a sword shadow seal onto a jade pendant and handed it to his daughter. "Yiren, keep this talisman close. Even if the void vortex hurls us off course, it won't tear you away from your father." Xiao Yiren received it with a curt nod, tucking the pendant into her breast pocket. A playful gleam lit her eyes. "You Taoists really can't resist being domineering, can you?" Before Ye Cheng could reply, a soft sigh floated across the waters. Both father and daughter turned to see a spirit boat drifting up alongside them. On its deck stood a woman in white, her robes like drifting clouds, her expression unreadable. Unlike the lone pair before her, she'd arrived with her clan's elite, several fellow saint monarchs, over a dozen saint kings, and dozens more saints clustered behind her. The woman's soft voice carried over the sound of rippling water. Well, venturing into the Cemetery of All Saints, are we?" Her tone held no malice, just a faint, knowing amusement. Ye Cheng and Xiao Yiren exchanged glances, each measuring the other's strength and intent as the spirit boats drifted side by side in the gathering haze. When the white-robed cultivator's teasing rang out, every member of the Qing clan turned to Ye Cheng in mild bewilderment. The void vortex that led to the Chaos Sea and the Cemetery of Saints was notorious for its wild teleportation energies. So volatile that even the Qing clan, having thrown virtually every resource at the task and dispatched 5 Saint Lord Elders, couldn't guarantee safe passage through its storm of spatial turbulence. To guard against being flung into some random corner of the multiverse, Each elder carried a chaos-breaking sky talisman, an emergency beacon to reunite them with the clan should they emerge scattered across the Saints' cemetery. Yet here stood Ye Cheng, traveling alone with the little girl clinging to his sleeve, and all he'd produced was a simple Taoist talisman, as if it were a mere trinket. Qing clan, Elder Qingrui couldn't resist a good-natured jab. "Do you really think that will keep your daughter safe?" he called out, nodding toward the girl whose big eyes flicked from elder to elder. Then, breaking into an inviting smile, he added, "Fellow Taoist, why not let your daughter join us? Our forces combined could watch each other's backs." Ye Cheng returned his smile, calm and unhurried. Gently patting the girl's hand, he declined. "I appreciate the offer," he said, "but we'll manage on our own." With that, he folded his Taoist talisman and turned away, confident in the path he had chosen. Ye Cheng gave a courteous but firm wave. "Fellow Taoist, my daughter and I are grateful for your kindness, but we'd prefer to continue on our own. Please forgive us." Before Qingrui could reply, Xianxia let out a cold snort and lifted her chin in defiance. "We really don't need anyone's help." To her, Qingrui's offer implied a lack of faith in her father's abilities, and that arrogance stung. At once, the Qing family masters exchanged disapproving glances. They had assumed Ye Cheng's refusal was a jest. One elder frowned and spoke up. "If he doesn't appreciate our goodwill, there's no reason to press the matter." "Exactly. Let's just move on," another agreed. Even the Saint Lord elders gave discreet nods. With the crowd united against persistence, Qingrui opened her mouth to object, then fell silent. Shaken by the collective will, she had no choice but to let them go. The tribal chieftain and her warriors thrust the spirit boat into overdrive. In the blink of an eye, they vanished into the vast sea desert, hurtling straight toward the roiling void vortex, leaving Ye Cheng and Xianxia behind. Ye Cheng simply smiled as the eye sped off. Rather than chase them, he held his course, guiding Xianxia with calm assurance into the tempest's swirling maw. No sooner had they crossed the threshold than a maelstrom of void turbulence, far more violent than any teleportation rift Ye Cheng had ever faced in the northern wilderness divine continent, erupted around them. Jagged currents lashed at the spirit boat, threatening to tear it apart. Yet Ye Cheng remained unfazed. With a single, effortless wave of his hand, he dispersed the chaotic energies. The violent bursts aimed at Xianxia struck an invisible barrier and dissolved harmlessly. As he drew near her side, the sword talisman he'd entrusted to her trembled, releasing 1,000 ethereal sword auras that shimmered briefly before vanishing into the void. 15 minutes later, father and daughter emerged unscathed. The spirit boat glided smoothly beneath their feet as they arrived at the solemn threshold of the Saints' cemetery. No sooner had Ye Cheng and his daughter appeared at the sect's entrance than dozens of seasoned cultivators paused in their tracks. Faces that had been indifferent a moment before now brimmed with surprise and curiosity. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Father and daughter, and both so strong, there's real technique behind their steps. Chapter 515. The void vortex leading to the cemetery of All Saints seethed with perilous turbulence. Only a powerhouse Saint Lord family, one able to dispatch several Saint Lords at once, could steady a spirit boat long enough to pierce its depths and emerge on the other side. Lesser cultivators, traveling in plain dress like Ye Cheng and his daughter, Xianxia, usually survived only to find their vessel in ruins as they tumbled out at the cemetery's entrance. Yet against all odds, Ye Cheng alone had stabilized their boat and guided it safely through the vortex. Such a feat could not be dismissed as mere luck. One by one, nearby cultivators stepped forward, offering them the use of their own spirit boats. Ye Cheng smiled faintly, sealed his boat's core, and led Xianxia onto an open outcrop. Stretching before them was a vast continent nearly 1,000,000 miles across, suspended motionless in the star-studded void like a colossal, unmoving star. From this vantage, the land radiated nothing but desolation and the chill promise of death. From a distance, its oppressive aura is palpable. That landmass is the cemetery of All Saints, and now its skies lie under an impenetrable shroud of chaotic mist. This foul fog is born of the lingering grudges of the countless tribes from the northern wilderness laid to rest here, mixed with the wrathful spirits of the demon men and chaotic races who once invaded these lands. Their resentments, fused with the ambient chaos, have woven a barrier no mortal, not even a domain lord, can simply tear apart. Any who attempt to force their way through are met with powerful resistance, their powers sapped, and their movements stifled. Yet this nightmare veil is not everlasting. At unpredictable intervals, a surge of repulsive force bursts forth from the cemetery's depths. In that fleeting moment, the choking mist disperses and narrow corridors open, brief gateways wide enough to admit those brave, or foolish, enough to venture inside. Legends say the repelling force that keeps intruders at bay in the Cemetery of All Saints is born from the heroic spirits of those who died on its battlefield, and from the restless heroic spirits still lingering in the world. Supposedly, these lingering spirits preserve their successors' legacies and grant them opportunities to grow stronger. Whether the tale is true or not has never been confirmed. What is certain, however, is that scholars and warriors alike have finally unraveled the method to open the cemetery's gates. Today is that day. Monks, beasts, and cultivators gather in eager throngs before each arched entrance, hearts pounding as they await the moment the great doors swing open. Whispers rise in a nervous hum, until a sudden, roaring sound cuts through the air. Hu-Allah! A dragon-headed spirit boat, resplendent and fierce, bursts forth from a twisting portal in the void. It descends like a shooting star and settles before one of the cemetery's gateways, sending a ripple of astonishment through the crowd. "Isn't that the powerhouse of the Yue Tianlong clan?" someone breathes. "The Yue Tianlong clan? The ancient god clan with a domain master in their ranks?" Another replies, awe lacing every word. As the spirit boat's dragon-forged prow gleams in the pale light, all eyes turn toward the entrance, eager to witness what trials and treasures await within the hallowed Cemetery of All Saints. "They must be here to give the younger clan members another chance at trial," one onlooker murmured. He turned his gaze toward the approaching vessel and froze. Descending from the Yuhua Tianlong clan's spirit boat were not only the robust young cultivators, but also a host of middle-aged elders. Each bore an imposing presence and radiated a fearsome aura. Every single one had achieved the Saint King realm. There were more than 10 of them in all. That alone was enough to draw gasps, but what truly sent a shiver through the gathered crowd was the figure who followed them ashore. An elderly man robed in pure white, whose renown spanned all of Beihuang Shenzhou. "Isn't that Yu Moyang, the 5th elder of the Yuhua Tianlong clan?" someone whispered in awe. "And an ancient. He's a domain master-level powerhouse," another voice added, trembling. Before the murmurs could die down, a sudden humming filled the air. From a second vortex in the void, another spirit boat burst forth. This time it carried no mythical beast, just human cultivators, eager to join the unfolding events. But its origins were anything but humble. A hush fell over the assembled crowd as the first banner appeared. The Blood Demon Divine Sect, an ancient and terrifying force, led by none other than their domain master. No sooner had it unfurled than another banner rose, signaling the arrival of yet another domain master. And over there, was that the great elder of the purple-feathered Divine Crane clan? 1, 2, 3. In rapid succession, more than 10 sects, each at domain master rank, made their entrance. Every force was headed by its own supreme expert. A low, uneasy murmur rippled through the cultivators and spirit beasts waiting at the gates of the Cemetery of the Saints. Ye Cheng, standing among them, couldn't hide his surprise. The Cemetery of the Saints was notorious even within the northern wilderness, a forbidden zone brimming with hidden dangers. In all the countless years of exploration, no major sect had ever sent its top-tier masters here en masse. At most, a sect might dispatch a squad of mid-level disciples led by 1 or 2 Saint Lords, turning the venture into a proving ground for younger talent. But now, more than 10 domain masters all converging at once, it was unheard of. What grave matter could possibly have drawn so many supreme experts into this accursed place? Ever since the Cemetery of All Saints opened, rumors had swirled about hidden treasures and ancient secrets buried within its mist-shrouded halls. But now, to Ye Cheng's surprise, the great domain lord sects had gone one step further. They'd dispatched their most formidable elders, Ding Haishan Zhen among them, into the cemetery itself. A spark of excitement lit Ye Cheng's eyes. There must be something extraordinary in that place, he murmured. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Around him, lesser cultivators and roaming beasts exchanged worried glances. They understood all too well what this mobilization meant. Whenever one of the sect powers sent their high-ranking masters into the cemetery, independent practitioners, no matter how skilled, were virtually powerless by comparison. At best, they could hope to gather the leftovers the elders had overlooked. Even that was considered a stroke of remarkable luck. Worse still, history taught them that these domain lords and sect chancellors rarely left well enough alone. Under the guise of mutual cooperation, they'd seize any stray cultivators they deemed useful, folding them into their own ranks. Many who'd entered the cemetery as free agents never returned the same. They emerged bound by strict oaths, serving a sect's interests rather than their own. Ye Cheng tightened his grip on his staff, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and caution. He'd come here seeking his own path, free from the web of sect politics. If there truly was a great opportunity waiting, he'd have to seize it and protect his hard-won independence before the domain lords closed in for the kill. In truth, the Taiku Divine Sect and its allied clans had corralled these freelance cultivators as nothing more than cannon fodder. Though unscathed so far, these outsiders had done all the reconnaissance before entering the Cemetery of the Saints, and therefore must have gleaned vital information. Memories of predecessors who'd met grisly ends here prompted many cultivators and spirit beasts to bolt for safety. Their panic, however, was hopelessly outmatched by the speed of the sect's domain lords and the Tianlong clan's senior masters. The moment anyone tried to slip away, they were blocked. "Hold it right there! Where do you think you're going?" barked a Tianlong disciple as he seized a hulking saint-level cultivator by the shoulder. "You look strong. Stay with us. Here, saint-grade spirit medicine for your trouble, and in return, you'll join the Tianlong expedition." "Don't worry," another master added with a reassuring grin. "We make sure no one misses out on the spoils." Before the cultivator could react, the master's grip tightened. He shoved the precious pill into the man's palm and marched him back toward the clan's formation. From start to finish, their movements had been impeccably coordinated. The saint-level cultivator wanted to protest, even flee, but his spirit had already crumbled. He dared not make another move. At every other entrance to the Cemetery of All Saints, members of the Taiku God clan and the Taiku God sect were streaming in, and Ye Cheng was no exception. As he and his young daughter, Xianxia, guided their spirit boat onto the mist-choked river that led into the cemetery proper, curious eyes followed their every move. Many cultivators and spirit beasts who had arrived early paused to whisper among themselves. A few polite questions or discreet glances revealed why. Both father and daughter carried an air of quiet confidence that earned them an unexpected fountain of respect. No sooner had their boat drawn level with the riverbank than a powerful figure strode forward. Clad in the crimson and black robes of the Blood Demon Divine Sect, the man's very presence seemed to make the surrounding air pulse with energy. He was a Saint Lord, one of the sect's top enforcers, and he carried himself like someone unused to rejection. He raised a hand in greeting, the hem of his sleeve flicking aside a pair of lesser disciples who had been trailing behind him. "A human cultivator," he said, voice rich with amusement. "Not bad at all. You're welcome to join my team inside the cemetery." Ye Cheng exchanged a quick glance with Xianxia, but the Saint Lord was already talking again. "Don't worry, we're all human here, and the Blood Demon Divine Sect doesn't play favorites. Any mortal Taoist who follows us into the Saint's cemetery advances together, retreats together, and shares equally in all the opportunities we uncover." With that, he swept his arm through the gathered crowd. A half-dozen human Saint Lords, caught off guard, found themselves gently yet firmly ushered into the Blood Demon Divine Sect's ranks. The Saint Lord beamed, satisfied with his recruitment. Around him, other cultivators paused, uncertain whether to step forward or hang back, as Ye Cheng and Xianxia continued toward the cemetery's looming gates. At that moment, he sprang forward, his hand sweeping down toward Xianxia's shoulder, planning first to steady her and then to invite Ye Cheng into his arms. But when his palm came down, there was no shoulder to catch. He closed his fist on empty air. "Huh?" Chapter 516. The Blood Demon Sect's Saint Lord Elder unleashed his attack, but it missed its mark. He exhaled sharply in frustration, and the onlookers, independent cultivators and ordinary disciples from nearby sects and clans, stared in stunned silence. This Saint Lord Elder was Song Changying, a master who had already reached the very peak of Saint Lord cultivation. Under the Blood Demon Sect's tutelage, he had learned Tao-level techniques, pushing him tantalizingly close to the Domain Lord realm. While he wasn't quite on par with a true Domain Lord, few Saint Lords could last more than 10 exchanges against him, unless they too possessed domain power from the outset. And yet, he had just struck completely wide of his target, a small girl named Xiao Yiren. Against someone like Ye Cheng, a slip like that might have been forgivable. Ye Cheng was a battle-hardened warrior, after all, but missing a child was unthinkable. Song Changjing's lips curled into a tight frown as he met the astonished gazes of the surrounding cultivators and demonic beasts. "I underestimated you," he murmured under his breath, his voice edged with both surprise and grudging respect. Ye Cheng felt his cheeks burn with shame, anger flaring in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. An outburst now would only deepen his humiliation. No, if he wanted to save face, he needed to move quickly and decisively. Sect Lord Song Changying's gaze settled on him, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I see you've invested countless hours in cultivating your daughter, and your own achievements speak volumes," he said slowly. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Therefore, I have decided to appoint you as Deputy Sect Master. Should you choose to align yourself with Shenzong, you will command all the scattered cultivators who have pledged their loyalty to us." He steepled his fingers, meeting Ye Cheng's eyes. "So, what do you say?" A hush fell over the gathered cultivators. Those who had been forcibly recruited into the Blood Demon Sect by Song Changying and the other Saint Lords went pale at the proposition. Envy and disbelief flickered across their faces as they looked at Ye Cheng, now offered a position of honor and authority that none of them had dared hope for. Forced into the Blood Demon Sect, these casual cultivators were destined to become cannon fodder in the Saints' cemetery. Even if they scraped together a bit of power or treasure, it was always the scraps the sect discarded. But if one could rise to lead these conscripts, everything changed. For starters, their personal risk dropped dramatically, and they could even leverage their position to extract better rewards from the sect. Sure, they'd still serve as tools in the sect's grand design, but it was infinitely preferable to the dead-end fate awaiting ordinary foot soldiers. Song Changying, fully aware of this reality, cast a condescending smile at Ye Cheng, as if bestowing a gift. "Brother Ye Cheng, come. Pay your respects first, then accompany me to meet the deputy sect leader." Ye Cheng remained silent. A flicker of impatience crossed Song Changying's face. "Are you truly going to refuse? Meeting the deputy sect leader, this is no small honor." At last, Ye Cheng lifted his gaze, his eyes cold and unreadable. "You're only human," he said quietly, "so I'll grant you one chance. Step aside now, and I'll pretend none of this ever happened." "Is that a warning?" Ye Cheng shot back. "Because if you don't stand down, it won't matter if your deputy sect master or even your sect leader shows up. You won't live to see them." Song Changying froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then he threw back his head and laughed, a deep, mocking rumble. "I've never heard anything so outrageous in all my years. No one dares belittle the Blood Demon Sect like that." He smoothed his crimson robes, lips curling in a cruel grin. "Young man, your mouth is quicker than your mind. I, Song Changying, will not let your insolence go unpunished. I'll refine you into a living pet and force you to kneel at our mountain gate, so all the world can witness the fate of those who insult my sect." With that, he unleashed a bone-chilling howl. Black spiritual energy snaked from his mouth, coalescing into a colossal blood-red longsword that stretched hundreds of feet. In the next instant, Song Changying surged forward, the massive blade whistling through the air, aimed straight for Ye Cheng's throat. The sword in Song Changying's hand was slick with blood. With every swing, the air itself seemed to shudder under the mournful wails of countless tormented spirits. Around her, cultivators and beasts alike went pale, their spiritual seas roiling, their defenses collapsing, and one by one they slumped into madness. Yet they were never her true quarry. Each stroke of her blade was aimed squarely at Ye Cheng. Had she meant to fell them, more than half of those gathered would already have surrendered and been executed on the spot. Indeed, the legacy of the Taiku divine sect was extraordinary. A stunned whisper cut through the chaos. That's the blood demon great divine art. Its slaughtering power ranks among the top 100 of humanity's 3,000 divine techniques. Forged and refined by generation after generation of blood demon sect masters, it now rivals the original forms of most of the top 30 great divine arts. As the crimson aura lanced toward Ye Cheng, another voice, edged with dread, cried out. This strike doesn't merely kill, it devours the very soul. Unless one has truly mastered the saint's domain, there's no resisting it. A collective shudder ran through the gathered cultivators and beasts. Even those barely clinging to their sanity stared at Song Changying in abject terror. This was the cornerstone of the Taiguo divine sect. Any Saint Lord Elder here could crush them without effort. Who in their right mind would dare challenge him? Song Changjing's laughter rolled across the courtyard. Did you hear that, young man? Regrets won't save you now, but rest assured, I keep my promises. This blade won't kill you outright. It will only plunge your soul into darkness. Yes, I will refine you alive, piece by piece. His cruel smile deepened as he raised the blood-stained long sword, its aura dripping with malice. In that moment, Ye Cheng finally moved. He uttered no spell, summoned no grand power. With a calm breath, he pressed his two fingertips together and drew a single line through the air. Chi! A surge of pure sword intent and radiant divine light exploded from his gesture, immeasurable, all-encompassing. It streaked toward Song Changying's poised blade like a celestial tide, halting the world in its breathless wake. The blood-red blade shadow that everyone had believed indestructible, even against anything less than a domain-level Saint Lord, shattered before Ye Cheng's sword. Song Changying hadn't even had time to react. The divine radiance of Ye Cheng's blade cut through him before he could summon any protective wards or cast his many spells. It was like ice meeting the midsummer sun. In an instant, Song Changying's defenses evaporated, and he was cleft in two. A geyser of blood spurted onto the battlefield as his severed halves fell with a sickening thud. Witnesses froze, jaws hanging open. They rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Could they really have seen a Changjing saint at the height of his power, one of the blood demon sect's few gifted cultivators, a master of the blood demon great divine power, slain so effortlessly? I must be dreaming, someone stammered. Another voice rang out in astonishment. That was Song Changjing himself. How could Ye Cheng's sword possibly have overwhelmed him in a single strike? He couldn't even withstand a single strike from this young swordsman. Those gathered around the entrance to the saint's cemetery, cultivators and magical beasts alike, stared in disbelief. They'd long known Ye Cheng was no ordinary wanderer. After all, he'd managed to escort his young daughter alone, defend the precious spirit boat, and atch the cemetery's threshold unscathed. Yet they'd always pegged him as Song Changying's equal in strength. No more. Now, confronted with Song Changying's lifeless form, they understood just how badly they'd misjudged him. A moment ago, Ye Cheng's blade had cut through Song Changying's defenses like silk, releasing a shockwave of sword chi that left onlookers blinking. But he offered no pause for awe or reflection. In a single fluid motion, he summoned a billowing cloud beneath his feet and soared upward. Gasps and hurried murmurs followed him as he streaked toward the cluster of blood demon sect masters standing further inside the cemetery grounds. What's he going to do next? Someone breathed. Another shook his head in dread. Is he really planning to wipe out every blood demon sect disciple who came here today? Chapter 517. A cold wind swept through the valley as dozens of cultivators and magical beasts froze in place, stunned by what they had just witnessed. In the distance, a small contingent of blood demon sect enforcers, sent here to oversee Song Changying's recruitment of new disciples, watched in horror. They had expected nothing more than routine negotiations with these loose-minded wanderers. Instead, they saw their peer struck down in a single, savage blow. The man responsible strode forward without hesitation. Ye Cheng's eyes burned with an almost feral intensity as he stepped over Song Changying's fallen form. Rather than retreating, he seemed to dare the sect's forces to stop him, as though begging for punishment. Two of the Blood Demon sect's senior elders snarled in unison. Both were renowned for their strength, near equals to Song Changying himself, and both were used to crushing any who crossed their path. They leapt into action, intent on eliminating Ye Cheng with overwhelming force. If they could fell him in one decisive strike, they would restore the sect's honor and avenge their comrade. But before they could unleash their true power, the deputy leader of the Blood Demon sect raised a hand, his expression unreadable. "Hold," he commanded, his voice ringing out over the tension-choked valley. "No rash moves." The two elders bristled, claws of chi swirling around their fists. Yet beneath the deputy leader's calm exterior lay calculation. Ye Cheng's display of power had shattered their assumptions. If they pressed forward too hastily, they risked revealing secrets better kept hidden, and underestimating this lone cultivator could be as dangerous as any trap. Silence fell as all eyes shifted from the deputy leader back to Ye Cheng. The only sound was the soft rustle of robes and the distant rumble of beasts retreating into the shadows. In that pregnant pause, the balance of power trembled on a knife's edge, and the Blood Demon sect found itself facing a challenge unlike any before. Boom! An overwhelming force, far surpassing even the combined might of the two perfect saints, erupted in an instant, extinguishing their deadly techniques. The sheer power of a domain master sent every cultivator and beast present reeling. None dared even to gasp. "I never expected to meet the God of War Academy's instructor here," murmured someone. "My friend, you must be the recently famed instructor of the God of War Academy, Ye Cheng." From the ranks of the Blood Demon sect stepped Deputy Leader Shui Lian, a man in his late 30s with otherwise unremarkable features, except for his eyes. They were unnaturally narrow and sharp, like a venomous serpent's, and under that gaze, the bravest soul felt a chill of dread. Shui Lian's voice was deliberate, as he fixed Ye Cheng with that penetrating stare, hoping for even a flicker of surprise. But Ye Cheng's face remained calm and unreadable. He paid no heed to the deliberate spiritual pressure bearing down on him. The other man's piercing gaze swept over him as if its spiritual might didn't exist, and it didn't faze Ye Cheng in the slightest. He merely lifted an eyebrow and replied coolly, "You know who I am? How convenient." Ye Cheng wasn't surprised that the blood-refining domain lord, the deputy leader of the Blood Demon sect, had recognized him. Taiku Divine sect, with its legion of domain masters, was one of the most prestigious schools on the entire Beihuang continent. Across the northern wilderness's 13 realms, there were no more than 50, maybe 100 sects of comparable stature. To ordinary cultivators, the instructors of the God of War Academy seemed inscrutable, mysterious figures spoken of in hushed tones. But high-ranking elders in each great sect kept exhaustive records, faces, battle feats, cultivation breakthroughs, every detail logged and cross-referenced. Being recognized, then, was hardly a surprise. Still, Ye Cheng had no intention of letting the Blood Demon sect off the hook so easily. He squared his shoulders, steeling himself for whatever challenge lay ahead. Ye Cheng's gaze was ice-cold as he addressed the blood-refining domain lord. "Although ignorance isn't a crime," he began, his voice low and steady, "it wouldn't have mattered if Song Changying had attacked me. But just now he was on the verge of striking my daughter. As Vice Master, don't you owe me an explanation?" The domain lord stiffened under that stare. He possessed the terrifying consciousness of a true territory lord. Ye Cheng was all too certain that Song Changying had recognized him the moment they clashed. If the Vice Master hadn't wished to see blood drawn, he could easily have restrained Song Changying, just as he'd stopped those two men before. Yet he let him run free, even target Xiao Yuren. For that alone, Ye Cheng vowed he would not let the Blood Demon sect off lightly. What the Vice Master's real motive might be was a question for later. First, he intended to make them answer for this. An explanation? The domain lord's eyes glinted with rage, but a cruel smile curved his lips. Around them, cultivators and demonic beasts exchanged uneasy looks, stunned by Ye Cheng's bold demand. When the blood-refining domain lord revealed Ye Cheng's true origins, everyone in the chamber fell silent. In that moment, they finally understood the source of his boundless confidence. None of them knew the full extent of Ye Cheng's achievements at Ares Academy, but with its formidable reputation behind him, avenging himself by killing Song Changying, the one who dared to provoke him, was hardly shocking. They assumed that if Ye Cheng humbled himself before the Domain Lord, the whole affair would be quietly buried. What none of them expected was Gu Ye Cheng's defiance. Rather than bowing, he straightened his shoulders and demanded an explanation from the blood-refining Domain Lord himself. Even the onlookers, who'd never felt threatened until now, bristled at his boldness. The Domain Lord's cheeks darkened with fury. "Boy," he snarled, his voice ice-cold, "I've indulged you only because of the Ares Academy's name, and now you have the nerve to challenge me?" Before anyone could react further, the Domain Lord swept out a hand. Instantly, the air around them convulsed, reality bending and twisting under the sheer force of his domain. The ground quaked as an earth-shattering blow. The true, unrestrained power of a Domain Lord was unleashed directly toward Gu Ye Cheng. For an instant, the entire clearing was drowned in a billowing wave of crimson light. Every cultivator and beast caught in its glow froze in horror, discovering that their cultivation, their spiritual power, even their very consciousness, the ultimate insight into the Tao they'd spent lifetimes refining, had vanished. Stripped bare of their strength, they were reduced to mere mortals, utterly at the mercy of the blood-refining Domain Master. In this domain, to those beneath him, he was no less than a living god, a true immortal whose aura brooked no challenge. Cultivators of the Daoji realm were aptly nicknamed Flying Immortals, but here even they fell powerless under his will. The Domain Master's tone was frigid and imperious as he addressed Gu Ye Cheng. "I will seize you and deliver you to the God of War Academy. And while we travel, you will tell me how the deputy hall masters of the Killing Tao Hall keep their underlings in line." He spoke with absolute confidence, for he knew Gu Ye Cheng's reputation well, how he'd mastered domain techniques and even overwhelmed the formidable Tianyu cattle demon. Now that Gu Ye Cheng lay at his feet, the blood-refining Domain Master intended to extract every secret he possessed. Gu Ye Cheng remained perfectly still, though the blood-refining Domain Master's dismissive tone burned in his ears. "So you've mastered a domain," the red-eyed cultivator sneered. "Come stand before a real Domain Master, and you'll see how laughable your little trick is." Gu Ye Cheng's heart stirred at the arrogance behind those words. He'd long suspected that this blood-refining Domain Master had been silently backing Song Changjing's assaults, so blinded by clan loyalty that he'd find any excuse to attack. Perhaps he had ties to the Sky Crocodile tribe, from which Qi Wenshuan hailed, or to the Quinyu clan that had once favored the disgraced Tianyu Quinyu. Whatever the truth, Gu Ye Cheng refused to be cowed. A cool smile curved his lips. "You're strong, by your own standards," he said, voice low and steady. "But don't delude yourself into thinking you stand above everyone else." With that, he swept his wrist. The spirit sword leapt into the sky, cleaving the air with a blinding arc of light. A towering rainbow of sword energy unfurled against the crimson haze of the blood-refining Domain Master's territory. In that moment, under the gasps of every onlooker, Gu Ye Cheng's power shone undisputed, an undeniable challenge hurled at the heart of his rival's domain. With a single strike, Gu Ye Cheng neatly split the blood-refining Domain Master's bloodlights in two, as effortlessly as tearing a sheet of paper. Puff! Chapter 518. With a single decisive strike, Gu Ye Cheng shattered the blood-evil domain. Crimson ripples collapsed outward like a dying storm, and the blood-refining Domain Master reeled backward, coughing up a mouthful of blood. His face drained of color as he stared at Ye Cheng, disbelief and terror warring in his eyes. How can this be?" he gasped, voice trembling. "My domain! How could you break it so completely?" He knew the true strength of his own blood-evil domain. It had only reached the minor success level, and even then, he had personally cultivated just 30% of its power. The remaining 70% came from the hoarded divine treasures left behind by countless practitioners of the blood-evil way in the northern wilderness. Over the endless ages, that harsh frontier had produced innumerable domain masters and realm lords, and even a scattering of Tao lords and dominants above them. Their legacies, armories of cursed relics, reservoirs of forbidden runes, vials of primeval blood, had lain buried in the wastelands, siphoned only gradually by those daring enough to claim them. Yet none of those dark boons had prepared him for Ye Cheng's sword. In that single, lightning-quick moment, Ye Cheng had unleashed a purity of intent and a mastery of the blade that rendered every stolen fragment of power meaningless. The broken remnants of the blood-evil domain drifted away on the wind, petals of black mist wilting beneath the sword's faint blue glow. The domain master struggled to his knees, gaze fixed on Ye Cheng. His voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you, truly?" Ye Cheng sheathed his sword without replying. The battlefield fell silent, save for the echoes of a power far greater than any forbidden inheritance. In that hush, destiny itself seemed to bend toward the young swordsman. Upon activation, this divine heirloom could spare any domain master from centuries, perhaps even millennia, of grueling cultivation and launch them to unimaginable heights. Such relics were inconceivable in earlier eras, but since the northern wilderness world opened over 20 years ago, more and more of these treasures have surfaced. Their proliferation gave rise to an unprecedented wave of new domain masters across the northern wilderness divine continent, figures like the blood-refining domain master himself. Yet even if one could shortcut 70% of the training grind, a half-formed domain still lacks true power. To the blood-refining domain master, his heirloom should have been more than enough to crush Ye Cheng without breaking a sweat. And yet, it failed. Ye Cheng's domain not only withstood the assault, but comprehensively overpowered his own, achieving a level of mastery thought impossible without exhaustive cultivation. How did this upstart manage it? The blood-refining domain master raged inwardly. Has he somehow claimed the legacy of a legendary sword sage, a supreme swordsman who perfected the domain realm? No, it can't be. Endless years passed. Even a flawless sword transference at the domain lord level couldn't contain more than a fraction of this power, barely a tenth of what he just witnessed. And yet this young man, not even 22 years old, wields such might? Ye Cheng must have claimed the divine treasure of some ancient swordmaster. No, even the sage's own divine fruit inheritance. A fierce heat ignited in the blood-refining domain lord's chest. This was news that demanded immediate report to the sect master. Between the sect's elite cultivators and the Taoist champions of the Quinyu tribe, they would combine their strength and find a way to capture this upstart, ripping his treasure from his grasp. He was already plotting strategies in his mind when the air around him shifted unnaturally. What? Alarm shot through him. He looked up, only to discover Ye Cheng standing silently before him, eyes as cold and unyielding as a corpse's. Ye Cheng stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the quivering domain lord before him. After a long moment of silence, the blood-refining sect's lead, bowed his head even lower, voice quavering. "You, little friend Gu, if you have something to say, please speak up." He swallowed hard, humiliation burning his cheeks. "Today, it was completely my blood-refining sect's fault. I offer our sincere apologies. Since our sect shares cordial ties with the God of War Academy, perhaps we can put this incident behind us." As the vice leader of the ancient god sect, the domain lord had never felt such abject shame, especially not at the hands of someone so young. Ye Cheng looked scarcely older than his grandchildren, yet no amount of indignity could free him from the boy's icy stare. His heart thundered with fear. One wrong move, and he might lose his life. Still, he forced a final plea. He expected some flicker of mercy in Ye Cheng's eyes, but found none. At last he whispered, voice barely more than a breath, "Ye Cheng, what would you have me do?" The blood-refining domain lord's voice trembled as he struggled to speak, but Ye Cheng had grown tired of his feeble protests. With a single, decisive step forward, Ye Cheng pressed a finger to the domain lord's forehead. Puff! A sharp crack split the air. The ruby gem set in the domain lord's third eye shattered, and with it the soul seal held in his sea of consciousness. In an instant, memories poured through Ye Cheng's fingertip, granting him perfect clarity. Just as he'd suspected, the blood-refining domain lord, and by extension the entire blood demon god sect, had long maintained cozy relations with the Quinyu tribe from which Tianyu Quinyu hailed, even currying their favor. But now that Ye Cheng himself had stripped Tianyu Quinyu of his title, not a single soul in the War God Academy dared so much as murmur defiance. Qi Wenchuan, too, had abandoned his schemes and dared not show his face again. Outside the academy, the senior figures of the Quinyu clan who had caught wind of the incident were livid. Although the Quinyus aren't formally absorbed into Ares Academy the way the Sky Crocodile tribe is, their clout there runs deep. Still, they rely on the Academy's prestige, so they dare not pick a direct fight with it, or with Ye Cheng. That restraint didn't extend to their allies. The Blood Demon sect, rumored to enjoy the Quinyu's covert support, leapt at the chance to strike Ye Cheng and earn favor. Leading the charge was the blood-refining domain lord. He never saw Ye Cheng's counterattack coming. In the blink of an eye, a single precise strike felled him. He crumpled to the ground, crimson pooling beneath him. A shocked gasp rose from the onlookers. Deputy Sect Master is dead? Someone's voice cracked in disbelief. Panic erupted. The remaining elders and deacons of the Blood Demon sect scattered in every direction, shouting, "Run for your lives." Within seconds, the corridor was empty, save for Ye Cheng standing amid the chaos, unshaken. The two divine sect elders who just thundered at Ye Cheng, threatening to avenge Song Chengying, turned out to be the swiftest runners of all. Could you blame them? He'd just slain a domain lord-level powerhouse. Sticking around would have been tantamount to inviting his own demise. The panicked shrieks of disciples scattering in every direction finally brought Ye Cheng fully back to the present. He watched their fleeing forms for a heartbeat, then let his finger twitch. In an instant, thousands of radiant sword beams erupted from his fingertips, streaking across the battleground like vengeful comets. Before any of the divine sect's monks, whether lowly saints, Saint King Realm deacons, or Saint Lord elders of the Blood Demon divine sect, could clear the area, those beams had already cut them down. He'd intended at first to spare them, but after plunging into the memories of the blood-refining domain lord, his resolve hardened. Their betrayal could not go unpunished. Just as he'd once annihilated the Tianyu Quinyu, so too would these sect traitors pay in full. Ye Cheng stood amidst the ruin of the Blood Demon sect's last stronghold, his blade still dripping with crimson ichor. Shattering the Tianyu Quinyu was never just for show, he murmured, eyes cold and unyielding. It's a warning to everyone in the academy who dares to underestimate me. He had lured the sect's elite straight into his trap, not only to protect his allies, but to spread his name like wildfire across the northern wilderness. Let every great family, every hidden power beyond the academy's walls, know exactly who Ye Cheng was. With one final decisive blow, he'd slain the last elder of the Blood Demon sect. The man's life force collapsed in a single ragged breath. Gazing at the fallen cultivator, Ye Cheng sheathed his sword. He turned to Xianxia, whose grievous wound had already begun to close under the residual aura of his sword. "Shall we?" he asked gently, extending an arm to steady her. As they made for the path back to the waiting area, a sudden glint at the elder's side caught Ye Cheng's eye. Curious, he knelt and retrieved a small, lacquered box sealed with a deep red sigil. The runes carved into its surface pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He flipped open the lid, and a soft, otherworldly glow spilled out. Ye Cheng's lips curved into a triumphant smile. "A parting gift from the blood-refining domain lord," he said, voice low with anticipation. "Just what I needed." Together, he and Xianxia vanished into the night, the ruined stronghold, and the legend of Ye Cheng left smoldering in their wake. Chapter 519. The blood-refining domain lord had come to the Cemetery of All Saints with a single goal in mind: to waylay Ye Cheng and earn the favor of the Quinyu clan. Yet as soon as he crossed the cemetery's threshold, envoys from the Blood Demon sect's oldest allies intercepted him with astonishing news. Though the Blood Demon sect was infamous throughout the northern wilderness, it remained one of the great ancient sects, led by a domain master and backed by powerful clans. As the sect's deputy sect master, the blood-refining domain lord wasted no time in consulting those allies. Almost immediately, representatives from several venerable sects and clans, long on friendly terms with the Blood Demon sect, arrived to brief him. They told him that the Cemetery of All Saints had not reopened because of some band of heroes or a sudden surge of mortal courage. Instead, the true cause lay buried deep beneath its shifting earth, the ancient tomb of a peerless cultivator from the northern wilderness, a man of legendary might who had perished ages ago. Within that sealed tomb slumbered a potent, innate divine fire, and now, after centuries of dormancy, it had finally awakened. This revelation explained the tremors, the sudden eruptions of flame, and the walls of bone and earth reshaping themselves throughout the cemetery. The Domain Lord realized that any attempt to attack Ye Cheng here would risk confronting a force far greater than a single hero. It would mean challenging the reborn power of an ancient master, freshly roused from the grave. Legends tell of a peerless master who once ruled the northern wilderness. When he finally fell, he had already reached the highest echelon of the Tao stage, the domination realm, and the treasures he left behind were said to be unimaginably vast. Over the centuries, countless relics from his legacy were plundered by successive generations. Yet one treasure remained intact, the innate divine fire, slumbering undisturbed in the furthest depths of the Cemetery of All Saints. Until now, no one had ever uncovered it. But recently, a wandering cultivator chanced upon a clue deep inside the catacombs. Renowned masters of divination and deduction were summoned, and after painstaking analysis, they confirmed what no one had dared to hope. The innate divine fire would awaken when this cycle of the cemetery opened. That is why, the moment Ye Cheng arrived with Xianxia, they were met by the assembled might of the ancient god clan and the ancient god sect. Fierce cultivators of extraordinary power swarmed the corridors, all driven by the same singular goal, to claim the innate divine fire for themselves. Lord Jing of the blood-refining domain had spent a small fortune on intelligence from several deduction specialist sects, all to get precise coordinates for the birth of an innate divine fire within the Cemetery of All Saints. His scheme was simple: draw Ye Cheng and Xianxia away at the crucial moment so they would miss the rising of the divine fire. Then he and his elite blood demon god sect cultivators would storm the cemetery, seize the treasure, and claim its power for themselves. Yet when Ye Cheng got wind of that carefully guarded location, he couldn't help but smile at how neatly the blood-refining lord had handed it over. With this one slip of information, I've saved myself countless hours of searching, Ye Cheng mused, his sharp eyes glinting in the dim light. No sooner had he spoken than the centuries-old veil of chaotic mist shrouding the Cemetery of All Saints trembled, swirling in great roiling waves. Outside the ancient mausoleum, cultivators and mystical beasts alike tensed in anticipation. Slowly, cracks of golden brilliance began to pierce the gloom. Each beam of light pulsed with an unassailable majesty and resolute will, as though awakening a long-dormant sovereign. In that instant, the very heavens seemed to shudder, and all who stood before the cemetery knew the world was about to change. All across the northern wilds, every cultivator and beast gathered around the Cemetery of All Saints, no matter their race or strength, felt the same surge of fighting spirit and unbreakable will. Even Ye Cheng and Xianxia sensed it deep in their bones. Then, from the cemetery's shadowed heart, a thunderous war cry rolled out. "My northern wasteland is invincible. All living creatures are immortal. Humanity will endure forever. All races shall rise in glory." As the roar subsided, a blaze of golden light tore through the churning mists that had long suppressed the Cemetery of All Saints. The light rent the fog asunder, forming colossal gates of pure radiance, divine channels beckoning every cultivator and creature of the north to enter, to seize their chance, and to grow ever stronger. "The Cemetery of All Saints is open." Ye Cheng exhaled softly, his eyes reflecting profound respect for the sages enshrined within those hallowed grounds. After a soft sigh, Ye Cheng gently took Xianxia's hand, dashed for the nearest golden portal, and leapt through it with the little girl. Around them, monks and mystical creatures, long poised for the moment, also sprang into action, each choosing whichever gateway stood closest. As expected, the teams from the Ancient Divine Sect and the Ancient Divine Clan surged ahead, staking their claim first. A few independent cultivators, fortunate enough not to have been pressed into service as cannon fodder, hesitated only briefly before allowing greed to win out. They followed, secretly hoping to snatch up whatever lesser treasures the two great powers might leave behind. "Hualala!" The cry echoed as the world around them shifted. Instead of the jarring shock typical of spatial transfers, Ye Cheng felt an extraordinarily warm, peaceful energy wash over him and Xiaoyiren, soft and reassuring, like a mother's caress. In that gentle embrace of power, they were carried smoothly onward to the fabled cemetery of the saints. Ye Cheng realized the power emanating around him sprang from the heroic spirits of every race's ancestors, entombed here in the cemetery of saints. He let out a low sigh and immediately grew alert. How savage must that ancient war have been to leave behind such overwhelming divine force, even after countless years. At first touch, the teleportation field felt smooth and tranquil, as if guiding him gently onward. Yet hidden within that serenity was raw power enough to obliterate a perfect-state realm master. To unleash and sustain energy of this magnitude meant there had to be more than one supreme cultivator, or even a Tao master, resting among these graves. So many champions had fallen here. What sort of enemy had they been battling? And most unsettling of all, what if that foe ever returned? Ye Cheng drew a slow, steady breath. He remembered all too clearly the tales and teachings from the War God Academy and the other exalted cultivation sects of the northern wilderness divine continent. Every record spoke of monumental clashes that reshaped history, battles whose echoes he now felt vibrating beneath his feet. Ye Cheng stood in the heart of the mausoleum, recalling why it had been built in the first place. Generations ago, when the cosmic demons and the chaotic clan first threatened the northern wilderness, the Great Council had erected this Cemetery of All Saints as both a warning and a bastion. Its purpose was to remind the living that should history repeat itself, champions would rise to meet those ancient terrors, and if necessary, drive them back into oblivion. At first, Ye Cheng had assumed that the great powers of the northern wilderness, places like the God of War Academy, hesitated to gather their forces merely out of caution. Yet now, having witnessed the power locked within these hallowed halls, he understood why. Only the truly mighty could dare to stand against such primal forces. A fire lit in Ye Cheng's chest. I have to grow stronger, fast. I must protect not just Xiaoyiren, but my own child, and my duties as a father. He drew a steadying breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped out of the golden quarry door. Battle-white light trickled behind him like spilled milk, and he blinked against it. In his mind, the Cemetery of All Saints had been a place of echoes, tombstones, and the fading stench of ancient death. Instead, he found himself surrounded by lush green lawns, marble statuary, and paths lined with flowering hedges. Birds flitted among the columns, and the air was warm with late spring breezes. For the first time, Ye Cheng realized that this sanctuary was no ruin at all, but a living testament to the heroes who had once saved their world, and to those who would have to do so again. His heart pounded. The road ahead would be long and perilous, but he would walk it, stronger than ever before. Ye Cheng hovered in midair, and wherever he looked, he felt a life force as vast and deep as an ocean. Spiritual energy swirled all around him, feeding the dense forests and the riot of magical herbs and flowers in bloom. Yet beneath that vibrant aura he detected a chill, a heavy, deathly chi mixed in with the life essence. He knew that if he simply absorbed this tainted energy, it would corrode his Dantian meridians and jeopardize his cultivation foundation. So with the utmost care, he extended his spiritual sense to sift out the dead air, purifying the currents before drawing in the heavenly chi. As he studied the blossoms and foliage more closely, he realized every plant here carried the same dual nature, brimming with both pure essence and lingering death chi. That coexistence of life and death was the Cemetery of Saints' defining feature, born of the countless heroes whose souls still clung to this land. In the northern wilderness divine continent, the Cemetery of Saints bears the unending grudges of every evil demon, chaotic race, and foreign army that fell within its grounds. Yet against that lingering malice stand the immortal sages and the legendary heroes they awakened, of every people, humans included. Their undying resolve to protect the continent clashes with the vengeful energies here, giving rise to the cemetery's singular power. Because of this paradoxical heritage, part cemetery of restless spirits, part crucible of boundless potential, the Cemetery of Saints is strictly off-limits to ordinary cultivators. At the same time, it's a veritable goldmine for top masters seeking breakthroughs, a place where the greatest risks can yield the greatest rewards. But Ye Cheng has already seen the price. Anyone below peak mastery who ventures inside suffers a profound weakening of both spiritual perception and power. That hidden toll ensures only the strongest dare to tread these hallowed and haunted halls. The combat power a domain lord wields in the Cemetery of Saints is at best equal to a saint lord who has mastered a domain. But Ye Cheng's lips curved into a faint smile as he focused his mind. In the next instant, a rippling aura burst from his body, like a miniature black hole tearing open in his chest. Around him, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was drawn inward, swallowed whole by his newfound void. Even the cemetery's infamous dead air had no hold on him. Instead, it was purified and converted into raw, cultivative power, fueling his ascent. Had anyone witnessed this display, they would have been shaken to their core. Since time immemorial, countless high-ranking warriors have braved the Cemetery of Saints, yet only a dozen or so in all those eras managed to directly refine its ambient spiritual energy without succumbing to its lethal aura. Today, there was one more. Chapter 520, thanks to Ye Cheng's immortal-grade physique, perfectly tempered by the Taichu ancient scroll, no form of corrupted qi can harm him. Whether it's the stagnant, dead air lingering in the Cemetery of All Saints, the demonic energies wielded by the alien invaders, or the chaotic currents of the chaotic race, they all act only as nourishing fuel for his cultivation. Daddy really is amazing, little Yiren sighed in awe, her dark eyes shining as she watched him. Ye Cheng didn't pause his cultivation. He continued to draw in the vast spiritual energies of heaven and earth, aligning his soul with the world's fundamental laws to ensure his exploratory spirit remained undiminished within this graveyard of the saints. Yet he still set aside a sliver of his consciousness for his daughter. With a warm smile, he gently ruffled her hair. "Don't envy me," he chuckled. "With my new immortal physique, even the most malignant qi only makes me stronger. Right now, these energies are like a rich broth for my soul. You're not ready for them yet." Little Yiren pouted, but her admiration only grew. She knew that under her father's guidance, she too would one day master the cemetery's energies without harm. For now, she was content to watch and learn as Ye Cheng's power grew ever greater. "When I help you acquire 2 more innate divine fires and guide you into the Xuan Emperor realm, your Emperor Flame Body will finally reach true minor success," Ye Cheng promised. "And at that stage, even these lingering fiendish energies will become a powerful tonic for you." Xiao Yiren's Emperor Flame Body was already of red 9th grade fate, brimming with untapped potential. The more divine fires she absorbed and refined, the more formidable her flame would become. Having integrated 5 innate divine fires, she stood on the threshold of minor success. Her power wasn't yet on par with Ye Cheng's. In his hands, the Emperor Flame could even devour Chaos Qi and Heavenly Demon Qi, but she was more than capable of absorbing any residual dark energies. "Understood, Daddy. Don't worry, I'll make sure nobody dares disrespect you," Xiao Yiren exclaimed, her small fist clenching with determination. Ye Cheng chuckled. Her fighting spirit never failed to amuse him. As he watched his daughter's resolve light her eyes, he felt his own comprehension of heaven and earth crystallize into clarity. Ye Cheng let his spiritual senses expand to their limit. With a flicker of thought, he sifted through the blood-refining domain lord's records and pinpointed the birthplace of the innate divine fire, a solitary, towering peak marked on the God of War Academy's Saints Cemetery map as Meteoric God Mountain. It had earned its name long ago, when several master-level cultivators fell there during the Great War. At the summit stood an ancient heritage palace built by the fire's first wielder, its lingering aura drawing the flame to these heights. "Daddy, look! At the foot of the mountain!" Little Yiren perched at his side on a drifting cloud, her voice trembling. She pointed down. From the mountain's base outwards for 1,000 miles, a seething tide of corpse demons had gathered. Their collective, blood-stained aura formed a vast ring that encircled Meteoric God Mountain, blotting out the sky with its oppressive, malevolent energy. Any who wished to set foot on Meteorite Mountain must first break through a tide of millions of corpse demons. Word has it that a hidden, innate divine fire lies deep within the mountain. Otherwise, why would so many of these abominations be drawn here? These corpse demons were once mighty warriors laid to rest in the Cemetery of All Saints. their bones reanimated into grotesque servitors. Though each demon now wields barely a 10,000th of its former power, the pressure they radiate rivals that of saints, and among them swirl countless saint kings and saint lords. Scanning the horde, Ye Cheng even picked out a few whose auras placed them at the domain master level. Worse still, the malignant blood spirits of these demons are psychically linked. The more they swarm together, the more fearsome their collective aura becomes, and beyond a certain threshold, that shared power feeds back into their individual strength. It's a living battalion, a nightmarish formation more terrifying than any army of cultivators. To breach Meteorite Mountain, Ye Cheng knew he'd have to face and shatter that very formation. A roiling sea of 1,000,000 corpse demons surged before Meteorite Peak, so dense that even a realm master would hesitate to charge in. "Daddy, what do we do?" little Yiren asked, her voice trembling as she stared at the nightmarish tide of the undead. Ye Cheng knelt beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His face was calm, almost indifferent. In his grasp lay the immortal execution sword array, now reinforced with top-tier, domain lord-grade execution blades. When activated, it could cleave a path straight through the ravenous horde, though it would drain every scrap of his energy. It was a costly maneuver, but hardly impossible. Just as he was about to deploy the formation, a sudden ripple of insight ran through him. He paused, his brow lifting as a playful smile tugged at his lips. "Don't worry, Yiren," he said softly, rising to his feet. "Watch Daddy work a little real magic." He lifted a single hand and pressed his fingertips gently against the jagged summit of Meteorite Peak. The jagged rocks under his touch began to tremble. With a clear, resonant voice, he spoke a single word, "Rise!" In that instant, the mountain itself answered his call. Under Xiao Yiren's astonished gaze, the once barren summit of Meteorite Mountain trembled violently. With a deafening roar, the ground split, and from within the earth there rose a grand temple of burnished red stone. No sooner had it fully materialized than its hidden power erupted. A torrent of innate divine fire flared to life, bathing the battlefield in a searing crimson light. "Awoo!" The corpse demons, millions of them, shrieked in terror. The weaker fiends disintegrated instantly into swirling black mist. Even the strongest among them were halved in strength. What had threatened to overwhelm realm masters became scarcely more than scattered remains, hardly worth the effort for any saint-king-level warrior, let alone for someone like Ye Cheng. As abruptly as it began, the inferno subsided. The temple's glow dimmed, and the last curling tendrils of flame vanished, leaving only quiet ash drifting on the wind. Ye Cheng flexed his fingers, the faint crackle of dissipating power echoing under the silent sky. "Daddy did that!" Xiao Yiren's voice rang out, a mixture of disbelief and delight. Her small face lit up, and she threw her arms around his waist. "You're so awesome!" Ye Cheng chuckled, gently tussling her hair. He looked down at the trembling blade of grass at their feet, then back at the distant silhouettes of defeated demons. "That was impressive, wasn't it?" he said softly. "But what you just saw wasn't Daddy." He offered her a conspiratorial smile. "That temple has its own ancient power. It awakened to protect us." Xiao Yiren blinked, absorbing her father's words. In the eerie stillness of Meteorite Mountain's summit, the two of them stood side by side, watching the last wisps of divine fire fade into memory, and understanding that this battle was only the beginning. Ye Cheng let out an abrupt shout. His young daughter jumped, eyes wide. "Daddy, why did you suddenly yell that?" she blurted, clutching his sleeve. He managed a wry smile, ruffling her hair. In truth, he'd seized this moment, standing before the northern wilderness lost inheritance palace, to test her reactions. Only moments ago, his spirit had brushed against the palace's ancient aura and sensed the slumbering innate divine fire hidden within its sanctum. "Listen carefully," he said, lowering his voice for dramatic effect. "A horde of corpse demons has gathered here, drawn by the promise of that divine fire. They believe that by consuming it, they can mold new spiritual insight, transforming into true supreme demons, their power rivaling or even exceeding that of ordinary realm masters." The little girl's eyes flitted back and forth, trying to look into the shadowed courtyard beyond. Ye Cheng continued, "But these beasts are nothing more than instinct-driven creatures. They don't realize this very fire once stood beside the sages of the northern wilderness, blazing atop the front lines against the forces of darkness. After the Great War, it was entombed here, hidden for countless ages. It cannot be conquered or swallowed by mere demons. He paused. A faint tremor ran through the earth. The palace's colossal doors groaned open, and within the yawning darkness, a molten sapphire flame flickered to life. But, he breathed, wonder and wariness mingling in his gaze. Side by side, father and daughter stared into the ancient chamber. The dormant divine fire was awakening at last. Though the swarming horde of corpse demons had thinned, it still pressed in from all sides like a living wall. Seizing the moment, Ye Cheng scooped the little girl, Xianxia, into his arms and prepared to claim the divine fire inheritance inside the palace. Yet the temporary lull in the undead tide carried its own peril. News of activity on Meteorite Mountain was spreading, and cultivators who had long ignored this remote peak were now converging. If the blood-refining domain lord and the blood demon sect, two of the northern wilderness's most feared powers, had already breached the cemetery of All Saints, it was only a matter of time before other domain lord-level forces followed. Ye Cheng had no wish for further conflict. With a swift motion, he summoned the immortal execution sword formation. 4 shifting layers of sword light arched overhead like a celestial dragon, cleaving a corridor through the corpse demon's ranks. In less than the time it takes for a single incense stick to burn, he strode through the luminous passageway and delivered Xianxia safely into the palace's inner halls. As soon as Ye Cheng stepped into the palace hall, his eyes widened in surprise. He murmured under his breath, "No matter how hard I try to keep things moving, time itself seems determined to stall me." Before him, at the very center of the vast chamber, burned a fierce orange-red flame, an innate divine fire, radiating brilliant light. Yet that alone wasn't what astonished him most. Having already climbed Meteorite Mountain, Ye Cheng had refined his divine sense to a level far surpassing most in the Saints' Cemetery. And now, through that keen perception, he discovered something no one had suspected. In the mountain's deepest, most secret cavern lay a second primordial fire, still dormant and unawakened. Contrary to legend, Meteorite Mountain did not guard a single ancient flame, but 2.